I do not.
Okay.
The cheat sheet.
Yes.
Will you please do the roll call for us tonight?
This is improv night.
Very well, I'll go with that.
Okay.
Jennifer, if you'd like to go ahead and do the roll call for us.
Of course. Chairman Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Dick,
Here.
Commissioner Lushnet, marked absent. Commissioner Lewis, marked absent. Commissioner Wilhelmi,
Here.
Commissioner Kemple, noted absent. Commissioner Hours, noted absent. Commissioner Straub.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Oh, if everyone like to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance. So we received the minutes before in our packages and had the opportunity to review. Does anybody have any corrections or additions to the minutes?
None.
Then I'd like to move that the minutes are approved as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So minutes are approved.
Yes.
And before we begin on the public hearings, just a couple notes for folks who may not have attended a planning commission hearing before. We do have an internet feed of our hearing that's available online. For those who may be watching online, I want them to know that no one is monitoring that feed. So there is no function for having comments read into the record at this time, and no one is monitoring the feed, just so folks who may be watching are aware. For those who are here in the audience tonight, I want to let you know that as you come to give comments, those comments are directed to us up here for the commissioners. And then for anybody who is placing a proposal before us, again, the comments and the questions will come from the commissioners this evening. What we would like to do is alleviate any basically conversations within the audience that are happening separate and apart and not on the record. So this is a recorded proceeding, just so you are aware of that also. We don't seem to have our podium here this evening. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go off to the side tonight?
A little bit of a new arrangement working with the Board of Trustees, so it's on the side tonight. So we'll have any members of the public and the applicants speak from the podium over there tonight. We'll see how that works, and if we need to speak with the board, we can see about a different arrangement next time.
So we're going from the side tonight. There should also be a piece of paper there. So when you arrive at the podium, if you haven't spoken to us or at the hearing before, so you give your name, your address, or what community you're a part of, and then there's also a sign-up sheet there where you'll list your name and then your address on the form, and it makes it easier when notes are being prepared, so they're not madly scribbling while you're talking. And so we'd like to go ahead, and I think that's all that I have. Does anybody have anything before we kick off this evening?
I think just before we do the public hearings, the town manager's here tonight for some brief introductions.
Oh, perfect.
If we could go ahead and take care of that.
I am Mike Foreman, came on as interim town manager in December. I was appointed as town manager in April. And so this is my first time to get to meet y'all. Just wanted to come in and say hi and appreciate y'all's service on the commission. It's very important that we have citizens serve on our commissions. It's kind of a gateway to getting people on our boards and stuff like that, on the board of trustees and stuff like that. And so we really appreciate y'all's participation. It's a very important service to our community because y'all are where everything starts, kind of. And so we really appreciate that. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
No, thank you for stopping by. We appreciate
All
it.
right, you bet. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go, and everybody's welcome to come to the concerts in the park. It's right after this meeting. It starts in about 30 to 40 minutes, so it's at Limbaugh Park. I'm headed that way, so appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We got the Stanley Cup.
That was it.
So much time pressure tonight. All right, I'm going to hand it over to you for the first hearing.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, the first public hearing item tonight is a final plat. This is for Flying Horse, filing number 1. I'll be quite brief, but certainly can answer any questions as we move along. So the area we're discussing is on the northwest corner of Washington Street and 3rd Street in our downtown. It's highlighted in green on this aerial photo. It's a little over an acre, and you might recognize this site. A zone change for this property was approved early last year. It was previously zoned R1. You might remember it had been a church and a childcare and some different facilities like that in the past. It was rezoned to B for our general business district downtown. It was actually originally platted in the 1800s, somewhere between 1874 and 1887. It's a little hard to determine exactly. So these are the original lots. They're those very narrow, long lots. There were actually 6 of them as a piece of that property. So the applicant's proposing to replat those into one lot. To make it a little more functionable as a business, commercial type property, you need to eliminate those lot lines. All the code standards are met. There's not any significant issues that have been identified, but let's take a look a little bit as to how that looks. And I'll just put a little disclaimer out right now for the entire evening that there are several sort of simplified graphics like this presented for presentation purposes. Obviously, they're not exact. You have the exact drawings in your packet, but it can be very difficult to see in this type of setting the actual plats. So, like I said, we have some simplified graphics. Again, as currently platted, lots 11 through 16 of Block 26 of the original North Monument addition to the Town of Monument plat from the 1800s. And again, very simple. The applicant is simply requesting to replat that into one large lot. Just as a reminder, this is a list of the agencies and departments where this particular submittal was sent out for referral. So all of these folks have had a chance to review the submittal, provide their comments, and receive any necessary revisions. You can certainly see the list there. El Paso County, our Chamber of Commerce, Fire District, our Public Works Department, all of those types of folks. And staff does recommend approval of the plat and can answer any questions the commission may have.
Does anybody have any questions?
No.
I don't either, no? No questions from the commissioners.
Okay.
So at this time then, does the applicant wish to speak?
Tim McConnell with Drexel Burrell. We prepared the final plat that's before you tonight for staff, city review, and your review, and then hopefully going to board here in July afterwards. But Jennifer pretty well covered it. We're just simply eliminating the lot lines to be able to build a new facility, a new building on the property. We can't do that across the lot lines. It would be non-conforming, so we have to come into conformance with current city standards or town standards. So we're eliminating the lot line to be able to move forward with a new facility there going forward. But if you do have any questions, be glad to try to answer them. As Jennifer mentioned, the plat was from the late 1800s, replatting it into one lot for a usable commercial lot going forward.
Questions? We don't have any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
I'm not gonna tell you, this arrangement's very odd.
I'm presenting from over there. It's very odd.
Do we have a motion?
Oh, Madam Chairman?
I'm sorry, public, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for the public hearing.
It is improv tonight, so,
My apologies. We haven't met since February, so
do we have any, I'd like to open public hearing on proposal 1 for the Flying Horse replat. Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Now, it would be a motion on the floor.
Considering it's always looked as if it's been one lot, I motion to approve the Flying Horse MOB filing number 1 final plat.
And I'll second.
Commissioner Dick.
Yes.
Okay. Chairman Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilhelmie,
Yes.
Commissioner Straup.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, the next public hearing item this evening, we started off with a nice, easy, quick one. And the next public hearing item tonight consists of a final PD site plan and a final plat. This is for Monument Ridge Apartments. So, to begin with the area that we're speaking of, the site is highlighted in red. It's on the southeast corner of Struthers Road and Baptist Road. So the very southeast portion of the town. So this site is almost 10 acres, just a little bit under. And again, you probably remember this site and project as well. A sketch plan amendment was approved early last year, amending the allowable uses there to a residential use with a density of 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre. So the applicant is back tonight with a final PD site plan for that site and a plat, essentially consolidating what were 4 individual lots into 1 large lot. Again, all the applicable code standards have been met and no significant issues have been identified. So to talk a little bit about the final PD site plan, what's being proposed, the applicant's proposing 4 individual residential buildings. They'll total 194 units. It's a combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Again, variety provided. There's open surface parking as well as garages provided. They do meet a parking standard, so there's adequate parking provided. And there's a variety of amenities provided for the residents. And so I'll highlight a couple of those when we take a look at the site plan. Again, because these are difficult to see, added some graphics to make it a little easier. So the green arrows are going to illustrate for you the access points right in and out of this site. These are all accessed off of private roadways within the Monument Ridge plan development. So the buildings are highlighted. Building A and D are the larger buildings. Buildings B and C, shown in blue, are a little bit smaller, located in the middle. And then you can see that there's a variety, or hopefully you can see, a variety of amenities provided. There's a swimming pool, a playground area, a basketball court, a dog park, a dog wash, a car wash, all sorts of amenities provided for these residents. So this just sort of shows you the basic layout that's included on the PD site plan. Obviously, there's a lot of other details that I'm not highlighting, including trash enclosures and a clubhouse and the exact location of the garages. But again, I wanted to highlight some of the main points. I have a couple elevations for you to take a look at. Again, really pretty modern architecture, a lot of what we're seeing right now. A lot of straight lines, very clean looking. It does meet sort of a earth tone type neutral color palette. And these architectural renderings have been reviewed and approved by the Monument Ridge Architectural Review Committee, which is required in this particular plan development. So they have seen these and do approve those. Again, a list of the departments and agencies that have reviewed this proposal. El Paso County, we're going to come back and talk about that one. 911, right, floodplain, Tri-Lakes Chamber of Commerce, the Air Force Academy, right, there will be a note on the plat having to do with that. The Fire District has reviewed it. Tri-View Metro, they have worked with the applicant and they are prepared to issue a will serve letter upon their final approval and payment. Electric, right, all these folks, including, because this is a residential project, this is actually the only residential portion of the town that is in Academy District 20 rather than Lewis Palmer 38. We did get feedback from them. They are requesting fees in lieu rather than land dedication. So they're aware of the proposal and those are their comments. So speaking about El Paso County, I mentioned that we had sent the referral to them. So El Paso County is in charge of both Baptist Road and Struthers Road in this area. So the roads fall under their jurisdiction. They issue the access permits. They maintain the roads and those types of things rather than the town or Tri-View. So, staff and the applicant spent a number of months working with the county to be sure that they had reviewed the plans, that they got what they need, basically, right, that it meets their long-term plans, what type of improvements are needed, and things like that. We did get, as you'll see in the packet, we've worked with the county. The applicant and the county have agreed to some basic improvements along Struthers Road, coming out of the south portion of the site. And there's a recommended condition of approval. That condition is direct language from the county. That's exactly what they've asked for. And again, those conversations have been had with the applicant, and the applicant has agreed to exactly what the county needs. With that, staff does recommend approval with conditions that I mentioned for the site plan and the plat. I apologize, I did not have a diagram in there of the plat. Again, it simply creates one large lot for the entire site. And just to quickly go over the conditions, this is somewhat of a summary, not their exact language. But basically, this is the condition recommended by the county, that the developer will provide plans, apply for, and get approval for the access permit for those road changes on Struthers Road before they get a certificate of occupancy, is what C of O is, for the first building. Second condition, this is fairly implied. I always add it in whenever we have other conditions. Basically, just approval is subject to minor technical corrections, right? There might be a typo or something like that, and we work with them to get those corrected before the site plan is recorded. Staff is available to answer any questions you might have.
Jennifer, quick question.
Sure.
Before the last meeting we had on this, one of the public concerns was drainage along that southern edge. Was that addressed with the county at all? Because there's a huge drainage, one of the owners that are adjacent stated that the drainage with the soils, it's eroding quite quickly. And so was anything addressed in regards to that drainage
Did you
area?
want to say something?
Yeah, do you have something to say?
Go ahead, it's fine.
This entire development has a detainage pond at the southwest corner along Struthers Road. So all the water that drains off of this site must be focused and sent to that particular drainage detainage pond.
And where does that pond go from there? That
It
drainage go from
holds the non-historic flow. The historic flow is allowed to continue where it used to go. It holds the additional hard surface creates more flow. And so they calculate that, and they make the basin big enough so it can hold it and then trickle it out at a historic rate. So it would go under Struthers Boulevard into that area that is almost like another drainage basin over there. Not sure it'll ever be developed, but that's where it goes.
And the car wash, is it a car wash or a dog wash that's going in there?
I believe there's both.
Okay. Is that part of that drainage, or is that more,
It was all accounted for in the drainage study that was a part of this portion of the project.
okay,
And so it was reviewed by engineers, and it was again sent to all of those agencies. The county in particular did not comment on the drainage aspect of it, mostly because it's all within the town boundary.
okay. Thank you.
I have a few questions too.
Okay.
Has Triview issued their will serve letter?
They have issued a letter that they will issue the will serve letter upon payment.
Okay.
And I have to imagine that the applicant hasn't written a check until they get their approvals from the town.
And then when I was reviewing the plans, there was some indication that the building level said 3 or 4 stories.
Two of the buildings have essentially a walkout on the backside, similar to the way a house would be, right? Our single-family homes a lot of times are 2-story on the front, 3-story on the back, but it's below grade.
Okay. So what is the level at which these homes will be considered to be their ground level? And my concern is that the starting point is on a ridge, which exists 20 to 25 feet higher than, as a point of comparison, the Fairfield Hotel, So these will loom over even that structure. Is that correct?
I think the applicant probably can give you a lot more information, but we do know the site slopes, and that's why you see the particular configuration of them being parallel to each other to accommodate that slope. So each building might be slightly lower as you go west. And then those buildings, each one, or some of them, are the ones that will accommodate the topography by having the walkouts on the low side of that slope.
Okay, just so the applicant's ready, I will want to go through that in some level of detail. District 20, did they have any other comments beside asking for funds in lieu of land?
That was their only comment.
With regards to the Air Force Academy, Baptist is a flight path. Did they have any comment on buildings, lighting, anything like that?
Their comment was the standard comment that they often provide with a plat that has a note having to do with potential, I can't quote it off the top of my head, but potential noise from the flight patterns and things like that. It's a pretty standard note that they require on most of our plats.
So there was nothing unique for flight path lighting or anything like that?
No.
And then the issue of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So with 194 units, we are expecting that there will be children living within the facility, and I'm wondering how school buses will access it. School buses will, of course, be necessary within the complex or along Baptist or Struthers, neither of which are conducive to a school bus stop. So the question is, where will a school bus stop?
I don't have an exact location. I would have to assume that District 20 would determine that and work with,
Because I don't see within the plans as they exist, a place where a bus could actually physically enter the site.
Well,
Just the turning radiuses aren't present for a bus to actually get in there and safely stop off two major arteries in our town. So was that addressed at all?
well, I would point out that the fire district reviewed it as well, and I have to guess that a fire truck and a bus are fairly similar in their size and scope of where they can, their turning radiuses and things like that. That's somewhat of an assumption on my part. But we simply haven't had those conversations with District 20. They hadn't commented on it.
And then the other issue is I was hoping with were any photographic renditions submitted of the sight lines from various points in the community? I'm digging back in, this is a little bit of historical here. When we had the water tanks that were gonna be built, they had done photographic renditions from various perspectives. One of the major issues with these apartment buildings is how they are going to affect some of the basic aspects of our town, which are the view of the mountains, which could be obstructed for a large percentage of our population, and how that's going to also impede our view of the Air Force Academy. Because when you look to the south, you're not going to see the academy anymore. You're going to see these buildings, which are going to loom over everything else in that intersection. And so were any photographic renditions submitted?
The photographic renderings you're suggesting were not submitted. I would point out that the height limitations for the plan development were considered, and that the proposals meet those.
And it's from a level that starts approximately 25 feet higher than the ground level for the adjacent Fairfield development.
I can't confirm that.
Okay, I would like to have that confirmed also then by the applicant. Okay, those are my questions.
I had some questions regarding, maybe it's on the prior map, or at least this map that I have. I can't quite understand where this site is in relation to the Fairfield Inn, the McDonald's, Chase Bank,
It's
Walgreens.
just east of the Fairfield and south of the AutoZone. And there is a vacant parcel south of McDonald's, between McDonald's and this parcel.
So the Fairfield is here. I don't know if you can see the
Okay.
mouse. Does the mouse show up on your
Adjacent to
screen?
these.
So this is Walgreens.
And then what's going to the right? That kind of goes over. That's the AutoZone.
Right, so there's, I believe this is AutoZone, this is Walgreens, this is the McDonald's and the bank.
And, I mean, is this
Site.
high-density housing, is this like the buffer to other, I mean, I see houses as well.
Right, there are county residential properties located to the south. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that on. And as a part of the sketch plan amendment, which allowed this density of residential, there was folks from those residential properties that spoke. It was my understanding that they preferred residential to commercial, which is what was previously allowed there.
And then to the north,
As far as what uses to the north?
I'm sorry, not to the north, to the east, sorry about that.
So there's a church still located to the east, and beyond that is outside of town limits.
Is there any planned development, as far as we know, to the east?
No.
And it looks like the site is right up adjacent to the Fairfield Inn, as well as that AutoZone.
Correct. There's private roads in that development. But yes, so there's a private road between the Fairfield and this development, if we look at. So if you can sort of tell, this is the, right, one of the private roads in there, and then this is the access from the site onto that southern road that connects to Struthers.
Okay. That's all I have.
Will, I'm sorry, do you have any questions, Commissioner Decker?
No.
Come back.
None.
For the topmost exit, which would head out onto Baptist, that would go between the Walgreens and the,
Are you referring to
not that one, I'm sorry, the one to the left of that.
So these both access only onto the private roads within the development. So there's no changes proposed to any access to Baptist Road.
No, but are those going to be improved upon? It's a minefield back there right now.
That's true.
There would need to be obviously some heavy improvements to those to be able to handle the amount of traffic this is going to bring.
The intersection at Baptist where King Supers comes out at,
Yes.
what did the traffic report state? As far as adding 194 to Baptist?
The private intersection of the King Supers and Jackson Creek Parkway?
Baptist coming into the community where this is at, right? Baptist coming in, it's right past Walgreens, right by Walgreens, so you're gonna go off, you're heading east on Baptist, and you're gonna
Okay.
take a right by the Walgreens into,
Mm-hmm,
if you're coming home, you're gonna take a right by the Walgreens
sure.
to get into your home, either building A, B, C, or D.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, did the traffic report indicate that intersection at all in the report?
Definitely. All the intersections to this development were considered, yes. And the only improvements that the traffic report generated had to do with that southern access point onto Struthers. And again, that's what was worked out with the county, as those are both county roads. So they make the decisions having to do with improvements or, you know, accepting the traffic report or not, things like that.
The
But-
traffic reports consider the distribution based upon where they consider the traffic's going to go and where destination is. I would suggest that at least going out of this area, there's probably a low volume because it's a right turn only. And so if they go up to Baptist and the right turn only, I would suspect there's very little traffic exiting this development to make that turn. So the biggest amount of traffic is expected to be on Struthers off of the road south of the Fairfield. And that's where the county focused its attention and basically requiring an additional acceleration lane when you're pulling out onto Struthers. So the median will be narrowed to allow people to pull out and have their own lane to go south.
That's the only full movement access point, is that southern access point onto Struthers. The others are both right out only.
Thank you.
And if you can go back to the photographic rendering of the visual. Was there any discussion of this between you and the applicant as you went through the process?
Discussion of the architectural features?
And the colors, yeah.
Of course.
And what was the nature of those discussions?
Number one, the staff required that they get approval from the Monument Ridge Architectural Review Committee.
Talk to me more about that. I haven't heard about that committee before.
So it was written into when the Monument Ridge Plan Development was originally approved. I want to say 2005-ish. Don't quote me on that exact date. So it requires approval by that review committee. Most of our other developments don't necessarily have that. They do, and so we, chatted with the applicant about them needing to be sure and have that before we brought this before you.
And who's on the committee? Who does the committee consist of?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
They have an individual, I believe it's in Colorado Springs, that monitors that. I'm not sure who he shares that with, but he's the one we're aware that comes back to us and gives us their feedback.
We
Is
did
there
reach out to
is
them
there
to
anybody
ensure.
from the town of Monument on that committee?
No. I would suggest that it's somewhat similar to an HOA.
I would disagree with that, because an HOA consists of people within the community, and what I'm hearing is that there's no representative from the community on this architectural review committee, which seems to consist, as far as I can tell, of one person.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you how many people are on it. I do know one individual that's on it who is a property owner in this particular area.
And who is that?
I'm sorry?
And who is that?
His name's Mr. Ellsworth. So we did, staff did reach out to ensure that this committee, right, was still present, that it was still there, right? A number of years have passed. So we did reach out to them. They are still present. Again, we encourage the applicant to have early conversations with them, right? It doesn't do a lot of good to go through all of these public hearings and things like that and get approvals and then go back and, right, there had to be changes. So they got that approval first. I use the analogy similar to an HOA because we would often require something similar, right, approvals from an HOA before we review and approve things, when applicable.
I just think this is such a striking difference than anything else within the community. And I know that the citation within the report said, well, there's nothing else within this area.
Correct.
So there has been no standard set, but yet when we look to the general custom and standard within our community, this certainly doesn't appear to be it. Okay.
I would suggest that the commission could certainly have some questions or conversations with the applicant about the architectural style or colors. From a very general perspective, it does meet the language in the code having to do with, right, somewhat neutral and earth tone colors, right? Browns and blues and whites and things like that. Again, it is somewhat of a more modern style than maybe some previous developments from 10 years ago or so in the town. We are seeing a lot more sort of move into this direction. And to be honest, there's not a lot of this type of development to really compare it to. But we could certainly have further conversations about that.
Okay.
Who's gonna manage this project?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure the applicant could provide that for you.
Any further questions for staff? No, I don't. Do you have any questions for staff,
No.
sir?
No.
We don't have any further questions for you, and we're prepared to hear from the applicant.
I think it's this one.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm John Romero. I'm representing the client Goodwin Knight in this application for the preliminary and final PD site plan and final plat. I will get to a lot of your questions. We actually have a lot of that information there, anticipating that some of those things would be asked of us tonight. So I'll get to a lot of those, and then any I don't touch, just please let me know and we'll answer those. See if I work this right. And excuse the, I agree, the sideways one, it's a bit difficult, so. And then the TVs. All right, as Jennifer noted, this site is located just east of I-25 off the I-25 and Baptist Road interchange. It is a 9.88 acre site located in the Monument Ridge development. Previously, as mentioned, there were past approvals for a sketch plan amendment, which we discussed quite thoroughly in regards to the traffic, the drainage, and also the density. There was actually a previous application where we came in before and came in and lowered the density after the second time. We had kind of a mixed approval on that. Originally, the Planning Commission had approved a higher density, and then in the second round, when we came back with a lower density, it was denied but approved at the board, just for kind of some context. So again, this application is for a preliminary final PD site plan and final plat. We are requesting approval of a multifamily development in the Monument Ridge subdivision. It is a replat of lots 5C, 10A, 10B, and 10C. The majority of those lots are in the southerly part of the property next to the Fairfield Inn. There is one parcel just behind, or just up to the north there. It is, as Jennifer mentioned, a 194 unit multifamily apartment complex. The density is at 19 DUs per acre, within the allowed density, 20, which is a 20 density max on this. There are 375 parking spaces that we will be providing, which will include 60 garage spaces. And again, as mentioned, we are exceeding the requirements for the parking, both standard and accessible. As you are familiar with, and I won't get into too much detail, there's 12 criteria that are asked to be met for both the preliminary PD site plan and the final PD site plan. I can get into more detail with those with you if you'd like, but I'm just going to go ahead and highlight a few of them. In the preliminary site plan, a few that we thought were applicable is the question of the fiscal impact of the project being addressed, and the project is expected to have a positive impact, otherwise provide the benefit to the town as such, increasing the variety of development to fill a need and to provide amenities for the benefit of the town residents. We felt that this proposal contributes to the mix of housing options to serve the growing area workforce and an affordable housing alternative for new homeowners and those transitioning in and out of single-family homes. Another one highlighted I thought was of interest is the variety of development housing types, styles, densities, proposed mixed land use encouraged. That was something that I'll talk more about again with the architecture and what kind of drove that in this mixed-use development. But we felt that this adds variety to a larger single-family driven community and strengthening the comprehensive plan goals of mixed-use developments with their appropriate access, more importantly, to nearby facilities too. Appropriate access and access to nearby facilities. The other one was the relationship between uses, both internal and surrounding, and adequate buffers provided. We spoke extensively about this in the sketch plan amendment, which some of you may remember. I don't think all the board members were here, but some of you were involved in that. The use is located in a planned mixed-use development. With appropriate use context, we have appropriate buffering achieved through the transitional use proposal and strengthened with the increased landscape buffering to the south and southeast. There's a previously existing 50-foot sketch plan buffer asked for on that side, and so that has been honored throughout the proposal. Number 8, utility service and utility services is physically feasible and economically capable of being connected to the town system, which unless such connection requirement is specifically waived by the town and is adequate capacity to serve the development. We have received, as Jennifer mentioned, the proper will serve letters and commitments showing the capability to serve the development. And more specifically with the water, as you had mentioned, there was a fee in lieu that was proposed for anything that we are short. So there is a little bit of a shortage on that from what was originally committed with the past PD site plan, but a fee will be paid in lieu, and TriView has reviewed that with us extensively to kind of figure out what that number is and what that fee will be. Plan design and layout are innovative and creative, and the architecture will enhance the architectural character of the town and contribute to other benefits providing affordable housing. Our plan does propose, as you saw, contemporary architecture style that we think will enhance the mixed-use improvements to date in that development. The proposed use specifically is aimed to provide a strengthened variety housing, again, in a growing community workforce. And lastly, for the preliminary site plan, one more, the plan is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and in effect with the time of the application, other relevant town goals and policies. We feel the plan is consistent with the CC future land designation, transitions, and buffering as mentioned between the commercial to the north and the residential to the south. Focused density in the location So now we'll get into the fun stuff. So preliminary, we have 4 buildings as mentioned. We have 2 types, which is the 3-story, and which is a 39-unit building. And again, that's a mix of studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments. These were again strategically located to deal with the grades, and then where we need to, we move to the second unit, which is the 3.5-story building. And again, a mix of studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. This one is a 58-unit building because of that extra half-story that you get on the other side of that. These buildings, when we did the grading, were really located at the points where we had the highest fall. You're gonna have the one at the north side of the property where because we have a private drive, which kind of constrained us coming into the site. And so that grade was set with the grade that's by the church. And then moving down by Fairfield, that was another challenge to get down while still meeting access. So that seemed to be a good way to kind of make up that grade, is have that half story.
So, John, a question?
Sure.
With the 3-story, can you say if it's A, B, C, or D on that in regards to?
So I don't have if I were to work my way south, if we start at the northernmost building, that'll be the 3.5. And then we go to the 3, we do another 3, and then on the south end, we go to another 3.5, because that's kind of our pinch points with the existing private roads. And then needing to make the grade in between. I have some pictures here just of some kind of similar recent product that Good Night was a part of. And not to diverge too much, but Griffiths Blessing has managed that project, and it's likely that they'll manage this project too. They're a well-known management company within Colorado Springs. They think that they'll likely have them manage this property too.
What was that name again?
Griffiths Blessing. So just to speak to the architecture, I'm gonna take the words right out of the architects because I'll probably mess it up. The project consists of 2 apartment buildings, 39 and 58 unit buildings, and amenity buildings including a clubhouse, maintenance, car wash, dog wash building, detached garages, mail kiosk, and trash enclosures, which I'm gonna go through. The architectural style is consistent between all buildings, sharing common design elements, materials, and color palette. Although not defined by a strict style or classification of architecture, we generally refer to these buildings as soft contemporary. Intended to be recognized as a new, high-quality architecture complementing the surrounding area. Through the use of building massing and material composition, the focus is on simple, clean forms, highlighting vertical elements, while keeping the buildings to a human scale with strategically placed horizontal elements and material transition. A sophisticated color palette, material palette has been selected to further enhance the architecture using warm wood tones, dark brick veneer, multiple coursing patterns, and a rich body of accent colors lending to the contemporary style. And to kind of expand on that, the thought is always in any development, especially mixed-use developments, is thinking about the type of architecture that goes with those uses, because you have the Fairfield, which is distinctly different. It's a little bit more of a destination. And then you have the commercial buildings. So you see a lot different architecture form in these mixed-use developments. You know, that's not as atypical as you would see in a residential development. So we want to make sure that we're syncing all those things together. And as Jennifer mentioned, we have kept the ARC involved. Mr. Ellsworth has been involved from the beginning with the development, understanding the unit mix, understanding how the development of the lot and the architectural features and amenities. Again, amenities. So at the very northeast part of the property, you'll have a clubhouse, which will offer a pool and some other exercise facilities potentially. We have garage parking. We have multiple, 6 total garage buildings, 10 units each. Again, that helped us take up some of the grades on some of the areas because that helped us be able to create some site retaining walls. But then also provide that additional amenity to the future owners or renters. We have a playground. Sports court. And directly adjacent to that, we have a dog park, a dog wash, a car wash, and a maintenance building. The car wash is a single car bay, and to go back to some of your questions, the intent would be that all of that water runoff would go into the storm system, be treated in the pond. So it won't add any additional flows.
Is the car garage just for the private residents? or is
Private
it-
residents
okay.
only, yes. These are all private amenities. Yep. Again, the thought is, when you have the access that we do have, and some of the limitations of a location is provide as much amenities as you have so that people can stay on site, do the things they need. They have access to goods across the street with Walgreens, although, food, King Soopers across the way, so it's in a unique location. And just to kind of close, again, we feel that the development is in keeping with the comprehensive plan goals of mixed-use development. We feel that it contributes to the mix of housing options to serve the growing workforce in the community and a more affordable housing alternative for new homeowners, and again, those transitioning out of single-family homes. Improved housing choices, we feel, not only supports the growing workforce, but the business economy behind it. Through proper integration and balance of housing options, a more manageable approach to growth consistent with the overall town plan can be developed. Again, it's consistent with the CC future land use designation. We feel transitions and buffering between the single family to the south and commercial development adjacent. Existing controlled access provides adequate ingress and egress onto Collector Street, supporting the mixed use development. And we feel that this focused density, it's important to focus density in a location as nearby services, shopping centers, schools, and open space. And before I segue to questions, I think in regards to the school bus stops thing, or item question, I think that we need to probably work a little bit more with the district and see how close their closest stop is, because a lot of times, I have kids, I understand that concern, is understanding the proximity of their current bus stop location and seeing how that's accessible. My assumption is that it's further up Baptist, because I know that's a safer place for some student access up there, but I know the developer is more than willing to work with District 20 and look at those options and then provide any information to families moving in that may have children.
There, just so you know, there's no stop physically on
No,
Baptist.
further up,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And that's my concern, is that we don't
Yeah.
want young children
Yes,
on Baptist, nor do we want them on Struthers,
Absolutely
because those are
agree.
major roadways.
agreed.
Um,
But I'll stop there and I'll open up to questions. Thank you for your time.
No, fine.
How many, of the 194 residential units, how many are anticipated to be studios?
I don't have that number in front of me. Do you have this thing?
I believe it's provided in the packet,
Yes, it should be on all the packets on the cover sheet. of
the cover
schedule.
sheet of the PD site plan.
So total 100, there's a total, between studio and one bedroom, there's 100. With 2 bedroom, there's 82, 3 bedroom, there's 12.
How many anticipated, or what's the anticipated population of children?
That's hard to say. It's hard to say. I think it's really a tough one to answer. I don't think I could give you a good answer on that one. It'd be a guess.
I'm looking at the size of the park.
Yep.
It looks to be about the size of that half court of basketball. Is that
Yep.
about right?
Yes, sir.
So what's planned to be there? Like just a slide? A
Playground
slide?
structure. So it would have probably slide, swing, multiple events.
Anything else anticipated for kids in this
The
development?
the pool, the sports court, and then hopefully the dog park is something that they can enjoy with their pets if they have pets.
Okay, Ms. Romer, one question.
Okay.
Have you taken a drive around our community?
I actually have had the unique ability to live in Jackson Creek with my family for many years.
Awesome. What percentage of design would you say is soft contemporary in our community?
And probably not as much as you want me to tell you.
So what was the thinking of bringing a soft contemporary design to that area?
The thought is, when you think about mixed use, to drop in a residential type facility or architectural style, it makes it stand out in that development, especially when you think about a mixed use development.
It's gonna stand out.
And it will, because when you look at commercial buildings, they tend to have more formal lines in their developments, flat roof lines. So that was really the thought, is complementing the existing development that's there. We do have the church to the east, which is a little bit different architecture, but looking at a way to provide something that was similar in nature to what's already there, with the lines and,
Because you have McDonald's, which is flat, you have Walgreens, which is, I would say, more traditional, you have.
yeah, they have some kind of eaves on them at some
And
points.
then
yeah.
you have Fairfield, which is very traditional
Yes,
style.
yes.
I would love to work with you minimum on colors as well.
Absolutely.
Can
I think-
we
yeah.
at least do something with colors to blend with the
Absolutely.
rest of those surrounding buildings?
We actually went through probably 3 or 4 color schemes,
Because the
so,
design is hard,
Yeah.
it's, like you said, it's gonna stand out.
yeah. I think that Goodwin Knight would be absolutely open to that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I didn't answer one of your questions I thought about. We were looking at providing kind of site sections. I'm working on those. I hope to have those at the board. We recently made some kind of minor footprint changes, so I haven't got to update those, but I will have those. And I'm more than willing to share those with you when we have those ready.
And then you stated that you are exceeding requirements for parking
Yes.
with the access from Baptist and Struthers. Why are we going more right now? Because it's just,
It's not a whole lot more. It's like we're in the, like, I think 3 to 5 spaces,
okay,
so.
and why is that? Just.
Site constraints with the grade, just making sure that we have the right amount of parking with the garages. The garages create some challenges because they take up a lot more space. So that put us closer to the requirement than we'd probably like. But again, the garages were meant to provide, if you look at this last site plan, some of the idea was to provide some buffering from some of those views. The garages was a good way to help take up grade, because the grade's a challenge, but then also not have this massive structure from the single-family developments to the south. That's why you also see increased buffering on the south side. We have a lot of evergreen trees, deciduous trees, so we paid a lot of attention to that side to also help with those views as much as possible.
Would the developer consider on that 3/4 turn off Baptist adding a light? So that the,
Unfortunately, I think that they would be willing to make any improvements they need to, but unfortunately, that's a county, that would be through the county that would have to make those decisions.
okay,
And I think with that 3/4, again, the thought was with the traffic report is, we assume once people kind of get into the space and understand that space, that they're gonna wanna come down Jackson Creek where that full movement is. You know, they may not wanna compete with some of the commercial traffic.
well, if you have 194 units, they're gonna wanna go across the street to King Soopers to get some burgers.
Right.
And it's just-
Yeah, and so that's where they'll likely come out the southern axis, which is where we're making the Struthers improvements. Granted, it's southbound, but that's where some of those improvements is they'll likely come out Struthers and go up north. Yes, just south of Fairfield. I would agree.
But then that means to enter the facility, I'm sorry to continue,
No, you're-
to build on yours, is that they cannot come out of King Soopers from the 3/4 and make it straight across. They would have to
No.
make the left out of King Soopers onto Struthers, come down and make another left into the facility.
Yes.
Right now, that left out of King Soopers
Brutal.
is, understatement, it is brutal and a crush because of the street, you live here,
Right.
you know this.
Well, not recently, I did. I do remember because I was there when it was built, so.
Well, it's only been exacerbated because now the street just to the north of that,
Yeah.
we've had additional density built there. Trying to get left and go south is almost impossible.
Yeah, and the challenge with any site is how do we manage our traffic flows on our site? So that's always the challenge, and I think the developer's willing to make those improvements with the access permits. I see our traffic engineer's creeping up, so he might wanna say something. So, and he's got better answers than I do.
So can we put a pin in traffic real quick so we can have a couple more on the side issues? I'm gonna put a pin just 1 second in traffic, just so we can do all of our stuff with you at once. Going back to these buildings and the grade and how tall they're going to be.
Yes.
Again, this development is uniquely situated within our community to where it is between our major population area on the west side of the highway, namely Jackson Creek, the view of our mountains, and the view of the natural drawing point, which is the Air Force Academy. So between the community and the academy is gonna be you.
Yep.
I'd like to go over how tall each of these buildings is going to be in relation to the surrounding areas. This is why I asked for the photographic
Yeah,
renditions.
absolutely.
It takes it from being an abstract concept into being a very much a, this is what you're gonna see when it's built. And that makes it so much easier. Sometimes that picture is worth 1,000 words, but we're gonna trudge through the words right now.
Okay.
In absence of pictures.
I would like to think, being somewhat familiar with the area, when you look at King Supers, you're heading east on Baptist. Even the next multifamily development is quite a bit higher than Baptist Road. So those views won't be impacted, I don't believe, any more than what the church already impacts it. We
Okay.
can create some site sections, and then also with the Walgreens, we'll likely be 10 feet below that, or the AutoZone, excuse me, to the north of us. You'll
So-
have those, so there's gonna be some, but like you said, I think a section would help, and I
So-
can share those with you.
Going from the building on your right, I believe that's building A.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
my glasses on and off here, I'm getting old.
Mhm.
That will be lower than the church,
It's 15 feet lower than the church.
15 feet lower than the church. So building B in comparison to building A will be no taller than building A?
No, no.
Okay,
we're coming
because the grades
downhill.
comes
Yeah,
down.
Yeah, no.
And then building C will be no taller than the other two, because
No.
you're continuing to
It-
come down the grade.
Yep.
You're stepping your way down.
Yep.
And then building D will be no taller than the others,
Yes.
but will be taller than the hotel.
I think it likely is, yes.
How much taller than the hotel will it be?
Let me look, I can probably tell you here on the grading plan. I was prepared for the church one, not for that one.
Eh?
Pull up the grading plan here. And I'm not quite sure of the finished grade of Fairfield, because I do know that when you come off that south access and you go on our westerly most private drive, it does come up quite a bit. So
Would have
it
to.
might even actually be quite comparable.
Okay.
Let me find our grading plan here. So if you look at the Fairfield, I'm gonna go off the access, it looks like it's at, 6825, and where our finished floor is at, it's a split level again, the lower level is at 6835, so our finished floor on the split level is actually only 10 feet higher.
Okay, so you are gonna take down
Yeah.
some of what is there. You're not gonna make that huge jump the way it
There
exists
is a jump
right
on the,
now.
yeah, no, because you'll have that additional bottom story. So.
Okay. Okay. And then, and this is something that I hadn't been touched on before, lighting. All lighting will be downcast, subtle, quiet, not to have huge
Absolutely.
glaring
Yeah.
field of light right there.
If you look in the package, we have a photometric in there, and we
Yeah.
also have the light that's in there.
Okay,
And it is downcast shielded light.
okay. We ready for traffic? Or do you have more questions?
Just curious about the interactions with Mr. Ellsworth.
Yes.
And his input, if any.
Yep.
Can you just enlighten us a little bit?
Throughout the process, we just kept them updated, letting them know what the idea was for the unit mix, what we thought was feasible for the development, showing him the architecture. He had some input into the architecture in regards to colors, but not as much as the developer. We just made sure as we kind of got further, we filtered it to him, but he had a chance to review it. The entire package, the architecture package, and had some input into that. But generally, he was pretty excited about the development and what it does for the mixed-use development, especially moving forward in the future buildings.
And it was only Mr. Ellsworth, no one else?
I believe, I believe so, yes, yes.
And fences, anything that surrounds this property at all, whether it's a ranch style or otherwise? is there
Right
any
now,
sort of-
we have not decided to gate it, but there will be, because, again, because of the grades, there's some natural buffers with the landscaping, the slopes on the sides of the hill. And then the club, because realistically, probably the best place for a fence, if there was an opportunity, would be at the clubhouse. But I don't think we want to possibly impede access there.
You ready for traffic?
Traffic.
Are you ready for traffic?
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, Jeff Hodgson, LSC Transportation Consultants. I prepared the traffic report.
You say Josh or John?
Jeff
Oh, Jeff,
Hodgson,
sorry.
yeah. So to answer the question about the three-quarter on Baptist Road, that has a bit of a history to it. there's been a lot of developments, and as well as the former mayor and Development Services Director, who were trying to convince El Paso County to allow a traffic signal there. And El Paso County has always said, no, we won't allow a traffic signal at that location because of its proximity to the other signal at Jackson Creek, Struthers, and Baptist. So the answer is no, and if the county did want, or were contemplating a signal, they would have asked the development to contribute to it. So, and they focused on that south access, because that's the full movement, and that's where we ended up with the left turn acceleration lane in lieu of a signal contribution. So that was the solution that the county wanted. Instead of money for a signal there for a potential future signal, they preferred to go with the channelized T, which has that left turn acceleration lane, which is getting more popular these days in the county and with CDOT. They're starting to look more at those as opposed to traffic signals because it's less disruptive to through traffic, and so it's just an alternative solution to a signalized intersection. So that's what the county decided they wanted. So that's what's shown on the plans. So just a quick answer on the school bus thing. It's, again, as John said, it's really up to the school district how they serve the kids in this community. My only thought, and what they may entertain, is you have the bus come in off Struthers, turn left in that south entrance, and then the bus could potentially, and I don't even know if the district would want a bus coming in here, but as far as strictly just the bus being able to make turns and navigate through the circulation, they could come in at the south entrance on Struthers, turn left, and then go north on the internal drive, and then maybe stop partway next to the Fairfield Inn with the doors to the bus on the apartment side, and then make a left turn and go out the right in, right out, back onto Struthers. That would be that's me throwing out an idea as far as, but it's really up to the school district as far as that goes. But as far as just being able to accommodate a bus turning movement internally, that's what I would think, would make the most sense. But that's just me. So it's really up to the district how to serve, how to provide service. If bus services, so that's all. Just throw that out there as a thought. So.
How did you know the mayor wanted a light there?
Because I worked with him on that. We were doing some development in the area, and he was an advocate for that. This is Byron Glen, years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was pushing for. He was trying to get the county to, because he thought it made sense for the commercial development, the viability of the commercial and circulation, and
Common sense.
so yeah. So he was, and it really hasn't been pursued since, as far as trying to convince the county, and I think Tom Casawara, the Development Services, he was a fan of it. He would have liked to see the light too, I think, at the time. So, but since then there hasn't been much push because they pretty much gave a flat no as far as that goes. So.
Thank you for that answer.
Sure.
I don't know if this is really for you more than developers.
Okay.
The idea that it seems pretty clear that there's really not been much, if any interaction with District 20 to have this discussion regarding servicing children.
Not currently. When they give us our comments, they usually comment on that stuff if there's a concern. But we've not heard anything, but I think the developer would be more than willing to come up with a plan, and I think we can discuss that and give any information needed. And again, it's, as you mentioned, it's hard to really say how many kids you may or may not have in here and how many families are gonna be there more than 6 months or more than a year. I'm assuming that what we were targeting is that transitioning family, if anything, but then I'm sure there will be children that will be here. It's really hard to say. I'm sure that you probably have similar kind of issues with the daycare to the north, right by King Supers too. It's probably closer to residential, which is nice.
The
But-
daycare's not there.
Oh, it's gone now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been a while since I've been up there, but yes, so, yeah, it's a challenge that I think that we're willing to work with the developer on, and they're willing to work with the district on. I don't think there's any aversion to figuring out what that may or may not be. And a lot of times that's what your management company helps you do too, if that becomes something that's a growing issue in the community, so.
Do you have any further questions?
Not right now.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So we don't have further questions now. After public hearing, we may call you back for additional questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor for public comment, if anybody would like to speak on this development.
No piece of paper. Terry Hayes, the Tri-Lakes Chamber. Wasn't there supposed to be? Yeah, it's empty. Anyway, for the record, Terry Hayes, Tri-Lakes Chamber of Commerce. I would like to speak for this. We have that's good English. We have spoken before about the fact that we have a need for diversity in our housing here. I hear consistently complaints from our businesses that they cannot hire. And a lot of our restaurants, a lot of our retail are paying $15 an hour, maybe. People are not gonna drive more than 10 minutes for a $15 an hour job, and especially in our lovely winters that we have here. So in order for our businesses to keep growing, in order for our town to have the sales tax dollars that we need to keep going, we need to be able to provide our businesses with the workforce that they need. I think the variety that they're gonna have with this particular complex is gonna serve many, many different people. I'm gonna repeat some of the things that they just said, but it's from the Tri-Lakes Chamber and EDC standpoint. And that is, we have young families that wanna move up here. We have young couples that want to start moving into a community, but they can't because they can't afford a $400,000 house right off the bat. We have a lot of retirees. We're hearing all the time that Woodmore, that whole entire community, is starting to change hands. The older community are realizing they don't want to sit on a half acre or quarter acre anymore and take care of it in their 3,000 square foot house. But they don't want to have to be forced to leave the community that they've been in for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So this gives them an opportunity to be able to stay in the area that they love, still have contact with their family and friends, but not have to have that home to take care of anymore. So it just gives a lot of variety. It would be nice to have some of our employees here actually live up here. We need more people living up here. Johnson & Johnson, our biggest employer, the vast majority of their lower wage people actually do go down to Colorado Springs because they can't afford to live up here. But they want to work for Johnson & Johnson because there's such promotional opportunities and it's a great company to work for. So they work where they can. So if we can get some of those, just imagine capturing a lot of those workers in our community so that they are going to our King Soopers, so they are going to our different shops, so that we are capturing their sales tax dollars here rather than them just going to work and then turning around and going back home again. And whenever you have people living and working in the same community, you get a lot more people that care. They really care about where they're at. You find if they only work here or they only live here, they're not as invested as they are if they do everything. So they actually open their eyes, they look at what's going around, they look at what's important to them, they show up to meetings more, they just are more engaged. And I think overall Monument would benefit greatly for that. So we are very much for this, and we think it's definitely gonna be a great addition and give some more options for people to live in our lovely community. Thank you.
Would anyone else like? Yes, sir.
Take my pen and sign it. And there's one up here. My name's William Schulze. I represent the Church to the East, Family of Christ Lutheran Church on Baptist Road. I just had a question for the developer. You mentioned.
Sir, if you can address us with your question and we can recall them. That was what I was talking about at the beginning. Rather than having conversations between yourself and the audience, we're gonna have all comments addressed to us.
Understood. I appreciate that. Thank
No
you.
problem.
My only concern from the church's standpoint, since I don't see this affecting our access is via a different route, not directly off of Baptist Road, but you go up and around. I don't think this is going to affect us in any way other than potentially the view. And I was just looking to clarify the 15-foot comment. Is that 15 feet? The roof is 15 feet below the church, or is it the lower part of the building is 15 feet below the church? Just trying to get some idea of what that impact would be. That's really, at this point, my only concern.
From the church, where are your view perspectives toward the mountains? Is it just at one end of your building, or is it throughout your building?
There are only a limited number of windows on the west side, and most of the view perspective is to the southwest.
Okay.
From the west side, those few windows on the west side. We have another building that was added 2 years ago that is further to the south and more to the east. And
It's the new congregational building,
the
right?
yes, the new worship center, and that, there's only one window there, and I don't think that would be affected at all.
Okay.
Based on where that is located and the perspective there.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to speak on this item? If we can have the, then we will ask you to provide clarification on the building heights respective to the church. So is it the roof that will be 15 feet below the mirror
The
roof?
finished floor will be 15 feet below. The
Finished floor would be-
building is, I believe, I think in that scenario, let me grab my pen. I don't want to misstate. I believe we're in the 40-foot range. So there'll be 30 feet. If you have the 15 feet, there'll be about 30 feet above. There's going to be some landscape improvements that we have to put on those walls.
So you will be approximately one floor, roughly,
One and a half above that 15 feet probably, yes.
above their
Yes,
building.
yeah. Because I would assume the finished floors are probably 12 to 14 feet. And then from there, we'll have another 2 stories above that. Does that?
Okay, so from where are you getting the elevation, at which point are you getting the elevation from the church?
I can't speak exactly to the elevation. I just know that the finished grade at that north part, or the northeast part of our property is X, and our finished grade of our building is 15 feet below that. So
Okay.
the church probably is another additional 20, I'm guessing 20 to 30 feet above that
Okay,
from
so
the.
let's go with
go
what
ahead.
you got.
Sure.
So the finished part of the northeast grade of that, by the church, what is that?
I'm not sure. I would say, let's put you at 0. Let's say
Okay.
that's at 0. Our first floor on our building will be,
Building A.
is 15 feet below that, yes. So likely of that building, the first story will be buried. You won't see that.
Okay, we're at .0 then.
Yep.
Where is the roof line of building A? The top of the roof?
Building A, if you look at 0, probably be in the 20 to 30 foot range above 0.
So 0, sir, so then you have the roof line at 20 to 30?
Yes.
Above that?
Yes, yep. So probably comparable in height to the church.
Mr. Schultz, did you get that?
Got it, yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Again, those relief drawings would be really helpful, the perspectives would be really helpful. Just understanding how that's gonna be.
I think that's gonna make your life a lot easier at the Board of Trustees if you have those.
We'll have
ready.
those, I promise. And I'll, like I said, I'm more than willing to distribute those to you in good faith so that you can see those too.
We'd appreciate that.
And talk to me about not only colors for the ACC, but the design for the ACC. What would they be willing to work with? Not the ACC, the architect itself. Would
I
they
think we're
work
open
with-
to discussions. We have,
would they
again, we have
go
multiple.
Softer contemporary, not just a soft, but maybe softer
Like brighter? No.
No, no.
No, yeah, absolutely. We have those
We have a
pallets.
McDonald's sign.
Yes, we
don't
have those
need-
pallets. And I think we have a lot of them already prepared that we can pull back out and put back on the table and
Not
talk about
colors, but design,
in regards to,
the architect itself.
Uh,
Because it's considered a soft contemporary, but
yes.
to soften it even more between McDonald's and Fairfield.
Mhm.
You know, you have McDonald's, which is, I would say, contemporary,
Mhm.
and then you have Fairfield with it, which is more traditional,
Yep, absolutely.
just more of a happy medium.
In regards to color,
Color and architect,
like features,
yes, like,
Um,
maybe some.
I'd probably let
roof
the developer speak to that a little bit more.
Okay.
I don't want to commit him to anything, but I think we've had those discussions. Now, how far? I'll let Brian Kniep
Okay.
with Goodman and I talk to you more about that. I don't want to overstep.
line. Fair enough.
We always have to rein him in from time to time,
He's doing
so. He was doing very well, though. I appreciate what he's done up here. Brian Kniep, I'm Vice President of Good One Night. We're the developers on this site. To speak to the architecture question, yeah, we're always willing to work on that. There's certain massing and blocking that we do just simply for the interior architecture to work inside the building. But when it comes to exterior features, build-out features, things like that, yeah, that's all fairly malleable at this point in time. We haven't prepared construction drawings yet. We're willing to work with everybody on that. As John mentioned, I think we prepared, 4 different color schemes on it. The one we presented was the one that we internally liked the most, but that doesn't mean that aesthetics are all a matter of opinion, I guess, at the end of the day, so.
Drive our community, please.
I have many, many times.
Okay.
I have more than this project in here right now, so yeah. But yeah, we'd be more than willing to work with that. So describe to me what you would be looking for, I guess, as a compromise.
I think the colors is easy. It's an easy enough
Mhm.
one. It's just that the Fairfield, it is traditional. You have pointy, roof lines, and then you have contemporary at McDonald's.
Right.
So almost in between the two, because when I think of a single family, I think of majority of our community being more of I would say 90% is a traditional eight roof line, and so. If it is single family, that's what I think of in our community
Mhm.
as more of a traditional style.
Right.
But I understand your challenges because you do have commercials
Right.
as well. So right now, it's just the color and the soft contemporary look
Mhm.
is definitely will stand out in our community. And I
Right.
don't know if it's gonna stand out in a good way.
Okay.
That's my concern.
Okay, no, that's fair, and yeah, we'd be more than willing to look at it, and, I was gonna say, can we actually pull up the architecture here quickly? I guess that's the closest we have right there,
But like,
That, and for our community, that is jarring.
yeah. Well, keep in mind too, architectural renderings tend to be a bit brighter, I would say, than what you typically will see in real life. Natural sunlight washes colors out a lot, so it's a factor of rendering programs at the end of the day, so it's, yeah, and screens are always hard to.
Just this roof line and this silhouette
Mhm.
and this style within our community is going to be jarring. And again, hearkening back to the unique place that you have geographically,
Right,
maintaining kind of blending
Mhm.
is better than standing out in this aspect.
well, and I think too, once, as John has mentioned and everybody's spoken about too, is getting a rendering of the site too, to see how they relate to each other and see how it relates to the landscape. And, we're looking at a building with no context at all. It's, this is,
It's hard.
here it is, this is our Lego block model. So we're looking at it from that perspective too, and I think that adding, for instance, the horizontal blocked elements that we have across there that are I forget the color name, but the more orangish color on there, going to a shed roof on that to soften that up, or even going to, rather than the tipped back shed roof on the very top of it, tipping it forward to give it more of a A-frame or more traditional looking. Those are all things that we can accomplish. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything we've talked about that's out of the realm of possibility. Is there anything else I can answer for you guys while I'm up here?
thanks, Brian.
Okay. All right.
Any further questions before I close, guys? No?
No,
I'm good.
I'm good, and you're good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the comment period at this time, and then we can discuss things among the board.
I think it's, I would second.
No, go.
I think it's appropriate, given that we already have conditions. There's an approval with conditions coming from Jennifer. And so it sounds like there's a handful of things that we need to, whether it's directional perspectives, photographic rendering. I'm really concerned on the D20 and D20's input. And having just something more than we're gonna work with them. I want their input. I'm surprised that they haven't provided input. There's gonna be kids here, and I'd like to have that. So I think it's appropriate for us to develop some more conditions.
And I agree. I think with school districts, how they tend within their transportation world is they don't often prospectively go look at something without it being kind of like an approval. So we're asking them to change it a little bit, but I think it's reasonable, given the high volume of traffic at the intersection where this is going to be located, that we make sure that there is a way for students to safely get to where they need to be.
Correct. I feel the same way.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
may I comment on the school district
Yeah.
conversation? Just a couple of things. I would remind the commission, this is the only residential area within the town that's within District 20. We have reached out to District 20. They did comment very quickly back. They have reviewed the project. They have also had this information for their own projections, right, their own reports and all of those types of things that they do. In my 12-plus years of experience, I have never seen a comment from a school district about a bus stop, right, because it's not something that's physically needed on a plan. That's something that they typically work out as necessary. Certainly the commission can handle it any way they see fit, but I just wanted to remind them of sort of the standard operating procedures with this type of development review and school districts.
And I think the only reason we deviate slightly from that is that we don't have options, because there is no physical egress to the south into that community. There's no stairs down there, so there's no option of going down that way. The only egress from this development is going to Struthers or going to Baptist, neither of which provide options. So the only option then would be internal to the development, which is within the plan, but yet has not been accommodated for yet. And so that's the only reason why I think it's slightly different, is that if it was a neighborhood or a building that had residential streets around it, or a way to get to them, great. There are none of those options present.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's McDonald's, there's Chase, there's other commercial things going on, and then the development itself. I'd love to even just get some input. If they're not willing to give input, so be it. But at least we're considering what's going on in there. And kids, and I mean, I just think it would be foolish not to tee that up now. And say we have an apartment complex with 194 units. I mean, and no consideration was given for a bus stop. And then we have Baptist Road, we have Strother.
There's no residential road
That makes
on
no
which
sense
to
to me,
position one.
so why not?
I do think that the current arch would stand out like a sore thumb. And I think if it was moved toward a more traditional, at least the top line, blending is going to be of critical importance.
And I like your idea of, we have McDonald's there, we have Fairfield Inn. If there's some sort of happy medium or compromise, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, in that little part of this particular area, that's just, I'm not totally opposed to just some slight modification to that architectural style.
Mm.
And I think it can be achieved, so
I think so too.
that makes sense to me as well.
You've been very quiet, sir. Do you have any thoughts or things that you want to?
Oh, I just know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. judging from the type of apartments these are, the type of clientele they hope to attract, the more modern architecture may be very beneficial to them. I don't know. These things are difficult to project, number of kids. I know in our residential neighborhood, they offer bus service. They're mostly empty. Parents are taking kids to school in their cars. You know, so it's a difficult question to deal with. Can't anticipate all of those things. It's the business of the school and the parents. So, whatever.
So do we want to,
Can,
can we pause, I think, ask for more?
Yeah, I see 3 conditions that we've at least explored or talked about.
Mm-hmm. In addition to the ones that are noted for Struthers Road.
Correct.
so we,
So, your input on this part, Jennifer?
Yes, ma'am.
And this was a while back, we had kind of come to a philosophical place where if we were looking at loading up conditions upon a motion, because we think that's kind of, was counterproductive to the applicant and kind of what's happening is that we could say, look, we've kind of reached the point where if we're looking at 3 or 4 or 5 conditions, we think things can be reasonably, can be achieved without conditions if we saw the applicant one more time and we saw some additional information. So we think we're incredibly close, but the way it's presented now isn't quite there yet. What would be preferable, loading up conditions or saying we'd like to have them come back next month and take a look at some renditions and perhaps look at a cleaner vote?
I don't know what they would prefer. I would just let the commission know that this has already been scheduled and publicly noticed for Board of Trustees on July 1st.
Presuming it just passes through us regardless.
That's our
That's
standard
what I said.
procedure based on the code language, that we do public notice at one time, right, whether, regardless of what the recommendation is, right, from this body, approval, denial, additional conditions.
Is the public notice terribly burdensome? Is it just?
It's not for me to determine.
Is it an advertisement in the newspaper, or is it that 200 residential homes have been mailed?
It's all property owners within 500 feet as well as the newspaper and publicly posted. It would be a legal question whether that has to be done again if it comes back to this commission. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And I still am on the same page as I was before. That doesn't impact in terms of the previously noticed board.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me, redoing notices doesn't bother me
Correct.
either.
Okay. I mean, I guess if we could take a vote based on the staff recommendation now without any of our considerations, see what happens.
Mhm.
And depending on what happens, then we either take another vote or if it passes or otherwise.
Okay.
So,
The motion with the conditions, that would only be if somebody puts that forward.
right. Okay. All right, so if we were to add conditions at this time, how perfectly worded do those conditions need to be right now?
I'll do my best to write. I'm ready to type up what you say. I can repeat it back to you. We can get to, some general language that you all feel is appropriate to move forward.
All right, I mean, I can articulate at least one of these things, maybe 2. That's where we were going.
are we allowed to make the conditions before the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you could discuss those with the intent of making a motion to include those. That way there's a little bit of discussion time. I think you could make that appropriately, yes.
Okay.
So my conditions would be in regards to the review of the architect to make it more traditional and the colors to make it more like the adjacent properties. That's, is what is one of my conditions,
Okay.
would be one of my conditions.
And what we're doing, of course, is making a recommendation to the trustees
Correct.
who can,
Overrule us completely should they choose to.
absolutely.
They can.
They can.
And my condition would be, just a formalized version of input from District 20 regarding or relating to the accessibility of school buses for children in this development. Just some sort of opinion, or not no opinion, but we reached out, or developer reached out, and here's the feedback.
So if, yeah,
Just
give them the
something.
opportunity, yeah.
An opportunity to formally respond and comment.
Staff would, responding to that, likely to simply call someone who is in the position to respond in the district and ask them if they considered that, or if that's a consideration at this time, and get some sort of input. So I don't think that's a condition that is insurmountable.
Okay, thank you. And it sounded like the photographic rendering, that was something that,
I just think that would be, it's gonna be useful at the next step. We've commented previously, like with staff, that helps us take a rather abstract concept in a building set in isolation on a rendering and put it within the context of our community, and it makes the conversation go much smoother. But I'm not gonna put a condition that they have to, I mean, it's not going to change, the elevation or the scaling along the site. That's not gonna change anything, so I would not condition it.
I'm fine with that.
So do we have two
Sounds like two.
thus far?
Sounds like two.
Is there anything else?
No?
So that, and plus the one from El Paso County with regards to the roads.
Just your number one, that's already in existence.
And I have that brief second one that just says, subject to
Technical
technical corrections. May I read back the additional conditions that I heard?
Yes, please.
So I guess number 3, before following what was already written, would be, I'm not sure exactly how you want to say it. Condition of approval would be a review of the architecture and color palette to be more consistent with surrounding development. Do you want that to be reviewed? Do you want that to be revision of?
I would revision.
Revision.
Okay.
And I think we need to discuss the concept of surrounding development. I think a very narrow scope of surrounding development has been taken with regards to this application, because essentially, there really isn't any other residential up here, so there's nothing to key off of. We want to enlarge and widen what is considered to be, what is the term you use, the community, the surrounding community, to a wider scope to encompass more of what the larger community is. So it's harmonious within our larger community.
Sounds good.
Revision of the architecture and color palette to be more consistent with
Should we say
community style?
the Jackson Creek community? Is that large enough? I think that gets us large enough if we say
To be
Jackson Creek
consistent with.
community.
How about existing Jackson Creek development?
That works.
Condition 4. Again, we can reword it. Requirement of formal input from Academy District 20 regarding school buses within this development.
I would say formal, I'm sorry, repeat that, what to me?
Formal input required.
Formal input required regarding the transportation plan for students within this development to the assigned District 20 schools.
One moment. How about,
Am I able to make a suggestion?
Most definitely.
If you look at the final PD site plan criteria, under number 9, it talks specifically about building design in terms of orientation, facing materials, exterior color, texture, storage, and lighting, and a quality architectural design is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So that's an actual criteria. That's probably something that you could hold to kind of.
So I think the tension that we're having is that surrounding neighborhood, the way it's been approached within the application is for a much more limited area, and we're looking to widen the geographic area that's being looked at. Because the verbiage here said, essentially, there's nothing else within this specific area.
Yeah.
We're looking to widen that to Jackson Creek, so you get, more of just the general style of the neighborhood. Again, we're looking to blend rather than stick out.
Right. And again, I think the challenge you have, and I think Commissioner Dick said it, is it's in the eye of the beholder. I think Goodwin Knight is definitely willing to work with everybody, but I think the challenge then becomes, are we setting a precedent for an architecture style in an area that maybe other people may, that becomes a challenge. And that's a challenge in any development, you know, where you work in any community. Is are we setting a standard that we can't meet moving forward? You know, or maybe that's the challenge, especially with architecture, because again, it's in the eye of the beholder. What I may think, or what you may think, or any one of the 5 of us thinks is comparative, may not be.
But our role is to express an opinion, and I think that we have
Absolutely.
reached one.
Great.
And
It's
we'll
just
express-
something I wanted to caught.
We'll
It's a tough
express-
thing in any
yeah.
design field is figuring out
So-
what is the right.
Yep.
the right-
We agree.
condition 4, formal input required regarding a transportation plan for students within this development to assigned Academy District 20 schools.
Yes.
And this group would feel comfortable if we report back to the board that we reached out to them and they have no input at this time.
If,
That's all we need.
if they have the opportunity to speak up and they choose not to do so, that is their choice.
Agreed.
Can't compel them.
I believe we need a motion at this time.
Okay, I motion to approve the site plan with the current conditions on hand.
So I think we may need to modify that slightly, if you don't mind.
Not at all,
Because we're
please.
gonna be approving the final the site plan and the final plat.
Plat.
Because we're combining the 4 different
Okay.
lots into one.
Okay,
So if you don't mind restating.
most definitely. I motion to approve the final site plan.
Recommend. I apologize.
Huh?
You're moving to recommend
I'm-
approval.
Thank you. I move to recommend approval for the final site plan and final plat of Monument Ridge Apartments with the current conditions on hand.
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Dick,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilhelmie,
Yes.
Commissioner Strop,
Yes.
Chairman Glover.
Yes.
Motion passes. Chairman Glover, may I
Yes, ma'am.
respectfully request a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. We're gonna take 5 minutes and we'll come back. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to give you guys my card, so you can stay involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Just in case you want, feel free to,
I think we end up having to go through official channels.
We all have something else coming down.
if you ever need anything, thank you so much.
And nice wording on the job. It's broader than just bus. How are you?
It's okay. It's all good. At the end, you know, I tell them. I say, you know what, I want to stay
it's set to 72, and I think it's.
Well, when the air kicks off, then I start getting really hot every
That's it.
But then when it kicks on, you're like,
Yeah, yeah, I'm like, wow, this is.
I know, I don't wanna mess with that, but,
I know.
oh.
I'm not touching it. This
I'll be
is
responsible. I mean, that seems reasonable. How
above
much
my
you
pay
do?
grade. I know, 72 seems comfortable, but it does feel
Maybe
cold.
we just turn it up 1 degree.
Yeah. Are you serious?
Yeah. I mean, it was switched to heat, it wasn't blowing.
I get it, but it's true.
I know, yeah. Well, it snowed like 3 weeks ago, so.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. So you see me coming
I come late.
really late.
Yeah. But then
This year
September and October.
are nice, really nice, yeah.
So, I know. I try to plan my trips during like March and April when it's gross here.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure on,
As long as
we're
you
being
can get
recorded,
it.
but,
Yeah. Yeah, so I think
I stand by that statement. September and October would be March
no,
and
as long as you
April.
can get out, like, when I was thinking I was trying to fly, and we could get, you know, to the boss, like,
I know, yeah, it has been.
but we're out of ground, so I can not see
Oh,
Yeah.
green.
I know, as long as we can drink.
Yeah, absolutely, I know. But I know it's fully stocked too, wow. But there are drinks over here, Commissioner Dick, if you need anything.
And there's a bunch of drinks.
And there's also a coffee maker, I'm not sure where the actual, oh my god, it is a thing, so. Yeah. Coffee for I assume this is fairly. Probably just take that out. Yeah. If somebody wants that.
Yeah, because what I did was, business minds, I just wrote really general ones, and then I put a note, Jennifer to take more precise. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm just glad to get out. I try to get out every day. Otherwise I get crazy. Stress, don't get true. If I did that, honestly. Yes, a compliment. Usually I don't answer when I'm working on
No, we feel like, anyone else, don't joke about it. Every once in a while you don't.
No, there's 7 minutes left here, last person.
There was, oh, that's a tease. It was such a nice surprise.
I'm very happy.
Why are you happy?
Because it looks like there's a definitive one.
Well, it's funny.
No, it's 7 minutes left, still anything can happen, but it's significant.
Not only good, fit. Do they have the ability to do it?
Are you?
Well, just because of the normally arrange.
Of course, I get that, I get the connection. There was someone else, CC does, as a. There's connections local, but kind of tired of lost. I kind of got.
I have my boss, because of cocktails. So it's like, I have my lot, but either way, it really doesn't.
Yeah, neither am I, so I'm originally from Maryland, but it's like, I like watching Boston. At least basketball, they still not run by ball, but like, super sports. So I kind of, I write all They're playing Boston. That is the only connection. So they just, I don't know if you watch it.
It's like,
The whole Stanley Cup's been yeah, 7 games, and you have these home teams that are playing way and then
they go wait, and they're like, dumping.
and then they dominate exactly on the road. So that's what they're doing. It's like,
Did you see how the towers are, the map? Oh my gosh, that happened.
I know.
And they said one of the late things, but it's really hard to get a official statement.
Correct. They just showed. And
Okay.
I was like, I'm just gonna ask, I don't know if anybody else is going to.
I don't see them moving it all like this. Oh, yeah. And I would say,
No, absolutely.
are you, tell me the fraction of growth out of over, like, I would.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's like for morale purposes or what, or maybe it's just simply. They have I don't know, it's just like, let's not distract, let's focus on it.
And it didn't, that's fair. It makes it a little easier to make.
So that's always different.
You know, we're so into things for.
Oh, here. That was just real. It's like, I know, I know. Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, you guys have another format stuff. So we'll work on that.
And I'm sure
No, I too, because I just don't do it, so we'll do that.
Thank you.
I haven't told Teresa this yet, but I'm gonna ask her to start helping the planning commission, like emailing you guys, like that, sometimes a little bit more, just a couple things, so. And she
yes, you have
took care of it today, so she can help getting that ready for you, and she's good at remembering with the right dates and the signage sheet and all that, so. We'll just work it up, because if we worked one up,
Yeah, I've enjoyed
the last time we were elected. So we'll send you one, see how you like it.
It's just like,
Yeah, okay.
it's just better, like, actually,
I know. I know, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard, so yes, we will do that. Our apologies for not having that.
I do look past that. I mean,
What are you missing?
just a little, I asked them to prepare a little script for me to make sure that I mention all the things I need to mention up front. Sometimes my mind kind of goes blank. So about like the video camera and how we don't want discussion in the audience. We want comments directed to us.
Yeah, that's very helpful. They had a script prepared at one time. They sent to us to cover at a training session or something, and that's kind of what you were looking for, wasn't it?
it really happens.
And I figure it's useful too. So if you're ever here, we're all working from the same.
Right, right, that's important. I don't know, here's some stuff here that they sent us back in for the May meeting that we didn't have.
Yes, because we didn't have a quorum until the last minute. Yeah, I asked them to do this here, and then this is the,
Opening statements, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and that, I wanted to get your, especially your comments, because you're very detail-oriented, and you'd be the person, it's either you or I who's gonna be doing this. So if you see anything that you want changed or adjusted,
Okay,
please provide a comment, we'll change whatever you want.
okay.
I think especially so people know there's no mechanism to react to comments coming in online.
Yeah, and, yeah, your comments about speaking to us as opposed to each other is very important too. I think that saves a lot of,
I think getting the structure in place, especially as the summer goes on and we get more contentious ones, we don't want it to get out of hand.
what's coming up? Did you hear next month?
I don't know anything for next month, but I have heard general rumblings, and I've seen the surveyors on site in the land just north of the senior center.
No.
there's an empty plot just
Yeah.
between the high school and the senior center.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been fooling with that for a while.
Yes. Many months. We ready to go back?
We are.
Good evening, hello. Here we are again. The final public hearing item for you tonight is, it's actually quite long, isn't it? A zone change, a preliminary PD site plan, a final PD site plan, and a final plat for what we're calling Monument Marketplace North. So, this is not the exact shape of the site, this is very general to point you in the right direction. So the area we're talking about is sort of highlighted in that teal colored rectangle north of the Walmart, west side of Jackson Creek Parkway. And this development would include an extension of Harness Road west across Jackson Creek Parkway. That would be the northern entrance to the site. So to sort of put things in perspective for you where we're talking about. And the Jackson Creek Senior Living Project is highlighted up there just on the north side of Harness Road, the existing Harness Road. So I'm going to try to go through the proposals for you sort of step by step because they're all just a little bit different. So the first sort of obvious proposal is a zone change. So the area that we're discussing is currently zoned Regency Park PID. So that's an industrial zoning in Regency Park. This entire area, again, that's proposed to be rezoned, is almost 12 acres. I put a little excerpt on the slide for you from the Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map. That actually calls this area out to be mixed use. So we actually feel that the changing of this zoning to PD is appropriate and consistent with that plan. Obviously, as you know, a plan development PD can include a variety of uses, and we'll talk about sort of what's proposed for this one. But again, moving away from that industrial zoning to more of a mixed-use zoning. So again, I have these sort of very simplified renderings just for presentation purposes. So this entire area, this roughly shows the 11.8 acres. This entire area is before you tonight to be zone change to PD plan development and for a preliminary PD site plan. So the other option for the applicant would have been to do, with their PD zoning, would have been to do a sketch plan, right, which is much more general. It would really be sort of colored bubbles, right, residential or industrial or commercial. So we've worked with them and they've taken the step to sort of take that next level, a little bit more detail, actually define some uses and define some basic development parameters without getting into site specifics. So again, those two would apply to this entire area. I've sort of mentioned these, right? This just takes that next step. There are a list of allowable uses, some really basic things like setbacks, and then each individual lot, as it would come in to develop, would still be required to do a final PD site plan that would become before you and the Board of Trustees. So the uses that they're proposing, again, it was previously zoned industrial in Regency Park. They've pretty much mirrored the Regency Park commercial uses. The commercial Regency Park PCD is what is zoned, the Walmart and all of that area to the south is zoned. So it would be much more consistent with what's existing there to the south. They made a few additions. Film studio, we're gonna talk about that for a final PD site plan. They've added some things like brew pubs, right? These sort of new ideas, these things that are very popular, craft distilleries and things like that. And they've also taken out a few, mortuaries is the one that comes to mind, a few things like that. But essentially, the list comes from the Regency Park planned commercial development, which is to the south. So, you know, it wasn't just, didn't just come out of thin air. That's really where the list derives from. Sorry, it must be getting late here, I'm stumbling. So the next phase of the proposal, again, so that big 11.8 acres zoning and preliminary plan, the next thing that's before you as a part of this package is actually a final PD site plan for what's referred to as Lot 1, a detention pond, and it includes the roadways to get there, right? Because it wouldn't really make any sense for us to present you a lot in a vacuum without a way to get there. So that ensures that those roadways get built. Again, Harness Road, I should also clarify, these are turned 90 degrees just because of the orientation to present to you. And in your plans, north is on the left based on that arrow there. So these really function north to south, but for presentation purposes, they're presented this way. Harness Road on the north side would be a public right-of-way dedicated to the town, maintained by Triview. The internal roadways, the internal north-south roadway is private, and it would be owned and maintained by other arrangements. Actually, each lot would include a piece of that private roadway. So let's talk a little bit about the final PD site plan. So I'll go back just for a second. As you can see on here, where it's sort of showing a building and all that, that's referred to as Lot 1, and we'll look at the lots here in a minute. And then obviously further to the south would be drainage for the entire project, including all of the lots. So that would be required to go in with this first lot, as would the private drive and this portion of Harness Road. So Lot 1, the proposed user is Ferrari Films. They're an existing business within the town of Monument, or they're currently over in that building where Triview is located. So they're looking to build their own building, right, and further develop within the town, make an investment here. So their particular site is a little over 2 acres. They're proposing a almost 16,000 square foot building. They've designed it in such a way that they could even expand that building if they need to in the future. There is a note on the plan that that would require an amendment to the final PD site plan, so that would come back before this commission and the board. But it is sort of already accounted for with some space in there, right, in case that need arises. Just to highlight a few things on the site plan, there's extensive landscaping proposed, but that little asterisk there is just to comment that they have all xeriscape, low water landscaping proposed, landscaping type techniques proposed. They have some synthetic turf, rocks, right, different type of rock mulch and things like that, some pathways, some hardscape, as well as plants and shrubs that are water tolerant. So we worked with them on that. That was reviewed by the town gardener and things like that. So that was all much appreciated. So I did want to point that out because when you do look at it, you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of landscaping. So I have a couple elevations for you to take a look at. Again, this is a commercial building, almost 16,000 square feet, 2-story. Again, these sort of straight, clean lines, a very neutral palette, quality materials with stone, brick, rock, those types of things, stucco. I have a couple elevations for you to take a look at. There's some metal awnings to provide some relief and things like that. This area on the north elevation would be their actually potential expansion area, and it backs up to their large landscape area. A lot of vertical elements, as well as quite a bit of glass on most of the elevations. I do have just a brief sort of excerpt from some of their landscape plan here, just to sort of highlight, again, the quality of the landscaping that's proposed, and that it is all within town standards in terms of water conservation and not being overly water dependent. A few additional site details, and I'm sure you've seen this in the packet, right? They're proposing a very nice open style iron fence. This is some signage that's consistent. I failed to mention it, but some of this signage style is actually mentioned in that preliminary PD site plan that would apply to the entire development. So what they're proposing would be consistent with that. So that was the zoning, the preliminary, the final. Now talking about the final plat. So we worked with the applicant quite a bit on this. They're actually proposing to plat at this time 7 lots. I'll take a look at a drawing here in just a second, including also 2 tracks, 7 lots, one being the Ferrari Film site. And then the private roadway is a part of the lots, and then the public dedication for Harness Road, public right-of-way. So all of that is included in the plat, which is referred to as Monument Marketplace North Filing Number 1. I mentioned the private roadway. The applicant can speak more about some separate agreements that will be recorded if you have questions about that in terms of how the road will be owned and maintained, but that has been reviewed. There's adequate notes on the plat to ensure that that is handled appropriately. And when you look at the plat, you might notice there's actually a lot of other easements shown on there. That's sort of how they determined how to draw some of those lot lines, because there's a lot of sort of physical barriers. There are some drainage easements, there's that overhead electric easement, utility easements and things like that. So I'm sure you'll note those on there. In my opinion, the plat can be a little bit difficult to look at because there's so much shown on there. So again, we did a really simplified version for you to see. Lot 1 is the Ferrari film lot on the west side of the site. Lots 2 through 7 would be adjacent to Jackson Creek Parkway. There would not be any access from Jackson Creek Parkway, just to clarify that. All access would be from the internal roadway. But they are located adjacent there. Also, the portion of Harness Road that would be with this first part of the development. And then, as I mentioned, the drainage in Tract A, that'll serve the entire 12-ish acres as it's developed out. And then ultimately, that private drive connects to the already existing private drive, which is that very northernmost entrance that you can take there to go to Walmart. It doesn't have a name that I'm aware of, that sort of private drive there. You all are familiar with it. So it would connect into that on the south side, the private drive in the middle. So again, very, very simple overview, but I think it sort of serves the purpose of illustrating what we're discussing. Again, a summary of the folks and agencies that have reviewed this proposal, have provided comments, and that, revisions have been provided when necessary. In particular, we've talked with the fire district about this. Tri-View Metro District, obviously they have a huge stake, right, in this. This is in their district. The best I can say about that is that the town, the applicant, and Tri-View are having consistent conversations about, right, their ongoing projects, widening of Jackson Creek Parkway and things like that, coordination with this project, other projects that are moving forward. So everyone is talking, everyone's on the same page, everyone's aware of what's being proposed. So there's actually, not sure if it's worth mentioning at this point, as part of the next phase that would come before you, right, if those lots along Jackson Creek Parkway were to develop and we bring a final PD site plan forward at that point, that's when a signal would go in at Harness and Jackson Creek Parkway. So,
Can you say that again?
a signal at
When?
basically phase 2 of development. So,
And that's a requirement? Okay.
and that was justified in the traffic study. So the Ferrari project itself doesn't require, but when those others start developing, that'll be required, and that'll go in. Again, coordination with Tri-View has been happening.
Excellent.
So, Fish and Wildlife, again, Air Force Academy, all those folks, again, were provided the review, the packet, they provided comments, and what you see tonight reflects all of those revisions. I know that's a quick overview. We can certainly talk more in depth about anything you have questions about. Staff does recommend approval of this. I know there's 4 pieces, but they sort of all fit together and make sense. The zone change, preliminary PD site plan, final PD site plan, and a final plat. Can I answer any questions?
I'll go ahead and start on this
Okay.
one. I had sent a message to you looking for the language on the specific allowable uses. So if we can see that, I would appreciate it.
Quite a list.
Yeah, there were some changes.
I have it. I can bring it up on the screen. It is also on page 2 of your preliminary PD site plan in the packet. So give me 1 second. Let me zoom in. This didn't work exactly as I had planned. It may be too big.
That's okay. That works perfectly right there.
But again, this list was derived from the allowable uses from Regency Park, planned commercial development, which is the zoning directly to the south.
And there have been some modifications to that list?
A few, yes.
Okay, so can you highlight the modifications that have been?
Quicker than I can. I know that mortuaries was eliminated. Let me look at exactly. They also eliminated an entire list of. No, that's already been. They eliminated any conditional uses. Trying to see what the other. I apologize. I have the list in front of me. I have both lists, but me looking and trying to summarize for you. Again, we may let the applicant, I know I discussed it with him earlier today. That's the main one that I see. I think there's another one or two. But if you have specific questions, we can certainly, I mean, I can provide you both lists.
One of the ones that as I was looking through, that I noticed was the public or private membership clubs, and then in parentheses would be the consumption of marijuana and/or marijuana is prohibited. So I wanted to make sure that that was called out, that we are not going to be changing anything or allowing the sale of anything, because that's currently against town ordinance, correct?
It is, so whether it was in here or not, it's still
Okay.
against the requirements.
And then, has there been any thought to, perhaps striking numbers 7 and 8?
That has been discussed with the applicant. I believe they will discuss with you why they don't feel that's appropriate in this location.
Okay.
Okay. How about, number 20?
On this list,
Yeah.
hotel, motels,
Hotel,
extended
motels,
stay.
or extended stay.
I'm not sure that a hotel wouldn't be appropriate in this location. So again, applicant wants to keep their options open. I don't know that
Just the
that's,
proximity to schools, residential, I mean, I live like 50 feet from where we're at right now.
I would suggest that the configuration of the plat, or at least the preliminary site plan, would not allow for anything that large because of the size of the lots.
But there's that big lot in the future.
Right.
right, internal to the site.
Yeah.
Again, maybe
So
that's
if
a
we- if-
20-room boutique hotel. I mean, there's so many options, right?
if we-
Again, I'm sorry.
If we allow the zone change, does it include just this, or does it include the?
It includes the 11.8 acres, which is
so
that,
the film and the 7 lots, 2 to 7, or in the future?
let me bring it back up. It's a little bit easier. So the zone change and the
Okay.
preliminary, which includes the list of uses, right, would be applied to this entire area.
Okay.
So I would remind the commission, I've had this conversation with the applicant, that I think these uses are much more compatible in this location than the industrial uses which are currently allowed. So that's how we got here before you tonight.
Well, what does the industrial zoning allow? Like, is it something like we approved with Tri-Lakes collision area? Is that more the industrial?
Potentially, right, light industrial.
Okay.
Again, we could bring up the exact list, but it's industrial in nature, so it would not allow things like restaurants or retail.
Okay.
Things that I think are not only maybe more appropriate here, but more likely to go here and what people want to see here, right? With the proximity to the senior living, the vistas, right? All of the residential further to the east, and then the existing commercial development there to the south.
But the continuation from what we currently have, to continue that continuity as well, potentially.
Right, certainly it may transition as we move further to the north, right? In the future
Okay.
with you, that may be certainly very appropriate. But like I said, staff worked with the applicant quite a bit and felt like this were moving in the direction of what the comp plan wants to see, right? What we've heard from those types of things in this particular location for development.
So is it foreseeable that like lot 2 through lot 7 would be one continuous building with?
It's essentially impossible because of those easements that are in place. Now, some of those lots could maybe be combined or the lot line could move, but it would not make sense. First of all, there's an overhead power line going through there, which is gonna have to be worked around, right? Go with parking or something like that. So, no, I don't see that being one entire building. I don't think that would work.
Because I was thinking on, like what happened with Struthers as you approach Starbucks heading south on Struthers, and that mini storage facility that was put up, and it's basically one monster wall.
Oh,
consuming
further
probably-
down.
Yeah, further down, but seeing that in this potential future of this area as.
So
not only-
mini storage wouldn't be allowed based on their list.
So now I'm thinking about, well, just a strip mall, you know, something that lots 2 through lot 7 is really just a strip mall. And in fact, I have no idea what the height requirements are, but as you're driving on Jackson Creek, going south, you're now driving against a wall, which is, you know, the backs of buildings. But it's different than the Monument Marketplace that's there now,
It is.
with the exception of, I guess, maybe Staples and, you know, US Taekwondo. It's broken up. And so there's still that feel that you can kind of see through it. You know, there's a mountain there, you know, it's not this corridor. I'm just curious about the lot 2 through 7.
Again, I can bring up the exact plat. While I don't think that the determination of exactly what will go there, right, that's simply unknown at this time. But because of those easements I mentioned, I think lot lines can move. We talked quite a bit about this with the applicant. In some ways, those lots are fairly determined, like I said, based on just some of the existing parameters that are there. There's drainage there. There's, again, that overhead power line. I'm trying to get to that plat. Give me just a second. And again, anything that is going to be approved, right, a final PD site plan would come back before this commission. So while this is setting the uses, you know, an exact configuration or something like that is gonna come back and be reviewed again.
Jennifer, the nature of private membership clubs, that's number 21. That's a bit of alarming, what it could possibly entail.
I have to assume that that's things like
Workout center.
fitness centers, things like that where you're a member. I certainly don't know what all else that could be, but again, there are some safeguards in place where it can't be like marijuana related or anything like that.
The
So-
so-called gentlemen's clubs.
There are separate regulations for that. They're actually even in a different title. They have extensive locational requirements, and I can assure you, based on what I know about that, that none of these sites would meet those locational requirements. Mm-mm.
And then, I'm building off what Commissioner Dick was saying, has there been an amendment to the town ordinances to more clearly define the term for number 2, clinics? The lack of definition for that term is what got us in trouble in downtown
Yes,
Monument.
that has been defined.
Okay, 2B.
I can bring up the exact language for you. Essentially, and this is very, very paraphrasing, there's sort of 3, based on exactly what you're referring to, there's sort of 3 terms: clinics, professional office, and there's another one. Oh, I just had it.
I think the main thing is that it can't go into the zone, what you're suggesting might,
Okay, so.
based on the new
It's a doctor's
ordinance.
office.
Okay, so.
That's what's allowed.
Okay, so to put on the record, the concern being is that clinics being vaguely defined before allowed for the movement in of a methadone dispensary using, they went underneath the term clinics, and I wanted to make sure that that was in fact,
They are very specifically defined now.
that had been changed, so that was no longer an option for that site.
On one of the maps, there's an indication of like sidewalk by others, and then, you know, future specialized intersection by others.
Right, so that has to do with that phase 2 of development. So the sidewalk along Jackson Creek Parkway would go in either as each of those lots developed or with the widening of Jackson Creek Parkway. I don't know the exact answer to that at this moment. And again, the signal, as I mentioned, would be in that phase 2 when additional developments go in. That was based on the traffic study. So not required today, but in the very near future. And again, TriView is familiar with that requirement and preparing for the installation of that light with the widening and those types of things, making the appropriate concessions now.
So is there any, because concessions are being made now, has there been any of that discussion with regards to that specific intersection? Because we do have the senior center there, about allowing protected movement across the roadway at that point for the seniors who may not be able to cross the street in the typical signal timeframe?
I haven't heard, I haven't been involved in any of those types of conversations. I don't think that level of detail has been, are you talking about a crosswalk?
Well,
Timing for a crosswalk light or something like that?
my thought is either a flyover or an under something where the seniors there, who would not be able to cross a major roadway within a typical signal time frame, would have the ability to cross the street, either like going under, like an underpass or a pedestrian.
I am aware of no
overpass.
conversations about an underpass or overpass.
My concern is that we are rapidly isolating the residents of the senior center and not giving them what I would view to be adequate options to be a member of our community. And that now is kind of the time to be looking at that, and TriView is probably the more appropriate person to
Absolutely.
talk with about that. I just didn't know if you had heard anything.
I would very respectfully disagree and just point out, I think these types of improvements will vastly improve the pedestrian connectivity within this town that is needed along Jackson Creek Parkway. Those types of improvements that TriView is very soon making, those conversations that are happening, while they don't include a flyover, those are fairly rare, that the fact that sidewalks and things like that are going in will be a huge improvement. And that there'll actually be places to walk to nearby.
Okay, so phase 1 is the film, and then phase 2 is lots 2 to 7.
Or any of them within there.
Okay, with the
Correct.
downturn of 2008, I saw a lot of projects where they started and phase 2 never came until 2014.
Yep.
Can we put a date to that light other than phase 2? Because my concern is, as right now we're expanding it, it makes sense to me that, hey, we're doing the work now, why not put the light in now while we're working, instead of a phase 2 that may or may not come? Can we be more proactive and put a date on that light in lieu of a phase start?
I don't believe we can because it's generated by the traffic study and what type of traffic counts warrant that. I would be happy to let Mr. Manning speak further.
In the interim,
Yeah.
until that light goes in, the traffic going north and south will be unimpeded. And the idea about the traffic light is when the people that are using the intersection in an east-west direction are starting to stack up, that's when you need a light, and the people will be impacted going north-south on Jackson Creek, but there's no reason to create that impact to them.
You know, that very valid. Thank you.
Okay.
It seems like that's also impacted by going east on Harness Road, because Harness is now going to be connected with Bowstring, right?
Correct.
And we talked about this before, where everyone Leather Chaps is gonna be using, well, a lot of people will be using as a shortcut to go north on Jackson Creek, simply Bowstring to Harness. So that is going forward as far as I can tell. You know, I watch the construction almost every day. So with Bowstring and Harness right now, I know this is slightly ancillary, but Harness really being developed and connecting to Jackson Creek, what's going to happen at that intersection, regardless, I guess, of what happens with this plat? Is that going to be just, it's not going to be a traffic circle. It's going to be a stop and try to cross if you're going left, merge if you're going right?
If you're speaking of Bowstring and Harness,
Yeah.
be a T intersection, likely three-way stop.
And then Harness to Jackson Creek.
What about
What's that intersection going to look like?
at Jackson Creek?
Yeah.
Pretty much like it looks like now.
Just a
There
stop
may be
sign?
some lane changes, some restriping,
And then that continues with Ferrari Films is in there,
Right.
but no real change, it sounds like. And then this phase two, the first second that phase two is implemented, some sort of, whether it's lot 2, lot 3, lot
Right.
4.
The
traffic light
additional
goes in?
traffic generates.
Okay, it's not until 5 of them fill up or 7 of them fill up. Is that the idea? It's once phase 2, once that lot, any one of those lots starts being developed or is otherwise a go, traffic light.
I believe the applicant may have their traffic folks here. I don't recall the exact language from the traffic study, so it may be more appropriate for them to answer that. Phase 2 is sort of the clearest answer for me to give at this time without that in front of me.
And then, like the Monument Marketplace that's there now, and I'm puzzled by it. There appears to be like a community gathering place of sorts, right by the big sign that's at the end of the road. You have Home Depot on your left,
Right.
you have Walmart to the right, and then right there's some sort of something.
The clock
It's just
tower.
an empty lot.
It's an empty lot, right? And I have no idea what the intention was with that. Is there some sort of thought with a community gathering spot of any sort in this development?
No.
So like, again, we talk about like movies here downtown and Monument in the summertime, things of that nature. That's not part of.
Well, with the proximity to the clock tower, which is where they do that now, there's been no discussion of an additional site within this development.
And that's not even a formal site, that's just an empty lot where it
Yeah, it's
happens
just a
to
lot.
happen.
Yeah.
Within the comprehensive plan, there was the intention that behind the senior center along the road, that there would be a public space park gathering area there.
Which,
Behind being east.
Behind, I'm sorry, yes, behind Bean East,
Yeah.
thank you. At least that's what's in the comprehensive plan. Now,
right, okay. All right. And then in terms of the signage that you indicated, it looked like that kind of blended in with the decor of that particular area. But then when you showed the building, again, we already had a similar discussion where the building's fairly contemporary. It's much different than the buildings that are immediately around it, including the Monument Marketplace to its south.
Yes.
What sort of considerations were given, and maybe the developer can provide more information?
They were the same developer for both, so I'm sure that they will be happy to answer that for you.
Okay.
Again, given some very, very basic parameters in the code, it does have four-sided architecture, a variety of quality materials, right articulation, a neutral color palette. That's kind of the conversation that has been had at this time, right? A variety of features, awnings, and things like that. An overlay or some type of distinct architectural style is not in place, as it is in some other communities, right? That is not something that we have or that we review against, if that makes sense.
and yet, when we heard the application from some of the other buildings just to the south of what this development would be, there are some very definite stylistic elements that come into play there. Because the way that the Wells Fargo looks and the way that those development looks is,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
it's
have a look.
very,
Yeah.
The timber beams.
Yeah.
That's
big
typically
timber.
the only defining characteristic. Again, I would encourage you to have that conversation with the applicant. It seemed to staff that they were, right, maybe transitioning. This is a different development, just a little bit different, a little bit more contemporary. If that's not what this commission would like to see, we can certainly have that conversation with the applicant.
any more questions?
No.
Question?
No.
Right. We'd like to hear from the applicant, please.
Is there a particular slide you would like, Brett?
No, at this time, how about Ferrari Films, the elevations?
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, commissioners, and thank you, Jennifer and Larry, for the kind of the background and the overview. And I would like to, I'll come back to your guys' questions. In the meantime, I would like to give a little bit more info on, and some background on Ferrari Films and how they've began and their backstory. So Ferrari Films is a local success story. For the last 23 years, Ferrari Films has continuously created award-winning educational training and marketing videos and websites for a variety of corporate clients in the Department of Defense. The company was founded by Denise Ferrari and her husband in 1996 out of the basement of their Woodmore home. In the beginning, there were 3 employees, Denise, her husband, and Peggy Moberly. The company secured its first government contract in 2001 and has been working with and supporting the Air Force and DoD ever since. Denise's husband died of leukemia in 2006, but Denise and Peggy were determined to keep Ferrari Films going. And as the company grew, operating out of a basement became increasingly impractical. And in 2012, Ferrari Films purchased an office condominium in the Jackson Creek Commerce Center, and they purchased 2 additional adjacent office condos in 2014. Today, Ferrari Films currently has contract employees on a project-to-project basis. Ferrari Films continues to grow and invest in the community, and with this project, they plan to invest over $5 million for a new office building suited to their specific needs. Ferrari Films has been very hands-on with the planning of this building as well as with the architectural styles, and they are all about the company culture and creating a beautiful and enjoyable space for their employees and guests. Denise could not be here tonight as she's actually filming out of town, but we do have in attendance Peggy Moberly.
Good evening. My name is Matt Moberly. I'm the Vice President at Ferrari Films, Vice President of Creative Development. I've been with the company for 12 years. I started in 2007. Wanted to thank Brett for giving a brief overview of the history of the company. I'm here to kind of answer any questions that you might have about what the company does, how we impact the community, how we integrate into the community, those types of things. Wanted to give you kind of just a quick rundown. Some of these things may be repetitive to what he said, but because this is my first time at the podium, my first time in this forum, I wanted to make sure I was prepared. So, as I said, I started in 2007. There were only 3 of us, and the company has been based in Monument the entire time that I've worked for it. We now have 16 staff members, some of whom live in the local Monument area. Denise Ferrari included. She was in Woodmore, and now she's over in Forest Lakes, which I don't know if that's within town limits now, but she's still very close. As Brett mentioned, the company specializes in the video production and development of medical multimedia and training programs for the DoD, specifically for the Air Force. That's been our client for the last 20+ years. As often as possible, our company incorporates and utilizes local business resources, locations, and restaurants to produce our programs. We have filmed in several welcoming establishments locally, including the Coffee Cup Cafe, Rampart Car Care, which is no longer, the Sundance Hotel, which is now a different name, Broken Bones Barbecue, DeVita Urgent Care, and Serrano's Coffee. The Monument Police Department has assisted us with filming and traffic control in the past, and we've actually also filmed in this very room for one of our courtroom scenes for Resilience Program back in 2016. Our staff members and clients support the area by frequently visiting many of the awesome local restaurants and stores on a daily basis. As an insight into our future operations, we're looking into adding more jobs to Monument by bringing on additional staff members at the new building with a potential total of 35 people. There's a possibility for a Phase 2 expansion. This is different than the Phase 2 that Jennifer was referencing. Our Phase 2 is we're kind of, that large landscaped area that we have to the north of the building, we were originally planning to build a studio there. Our needs have changed, our workload has changed. So we are holding off on building the studio. A lot of the work that we're doing is actually national. We're traveling to a lot of bases. We're doing a lot of filming out of the state. Some of it is still happening locally, like the Air Force Academy and things, but we're looking at doing a studio maybe 3 to 5 years down the line. Just kind of depends on where our workload goes. Let's see here. If we don't build the studio out, there is a possibility of future expansion with the building and actually turning that space into more office space, which would accommodate about double the staff, so close to 60. Let's see. These are kind of just closing things, but Denise wanted me to convey she was sorry that she couldn't be here. She really wanted to be. But we are fortunate to be a part of this thriving community that supplies us with local resources for our immediate needs. And I know that I speak for the owner, Denise, our vice president, Peggy, and all of our staff when I say that we're committed to the town of Monument and grateful for its supportive business environment. There's a reason that we are still here. We thank all of you for your consideration of this project and look forward to continuing our contribution to the Monument community as we enter the next chapter of Ferrari Films. So, like I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions about what the company does and where we're headed.
So with regards to the building, as it stands right now, it would be a single-use building. You'd be the sole occupant of the building.
Correct.
When you mentioned a studio, will any part of your facilities be subleased out or available for single-use rentals?
Not at this time,
Okay.
no. There was a possibility when we were having initial discussions about the building of leasing out certain sections of it, and we've actually kind of accommodated for that, potential, but at this time, we are moving because we've outgrown the space we're in. We have 3 office condos at the Jackson Creek Commerce Center, and what we're running into is we're running out of space. We need the space because we're growing so rapidly. So as of right now, sole use.
And then when you talk about a studio, would that be a soundstage, a post-production facility, or a sound recording facility?
It would be a soundstage.
Okay.
And that is a potential. That is completely off the table right now. Right now, that is an outdoor walking trail and heavily landscaped area. We've got some AstroTurf and things out there. That's kind of the plan for now.
And would the current facility house primarily post-production work?
It houses the entire process. So we have producers, we have post-production, we have administration and business managers, and then we also have a marketing team.
Okay.
So a lot of those things are going on. We do all of our own post-production in-house.
Okay. So I don't have any, and then the only other question, the unique communication needs, you don't need to take footage from other areas of the country. Do you have the dedicated internet support that's available for you at the facility?
Oh, yeah.
The large bandwidth, is it?
Yep, and we're well accommodated at our current facility, at Jackson Creek Commerce Center.
Okay.
It's nothing more than standard internet connections for us.
Okay.
Most of our projects take anywhere from 6 months to a year. They're longer, drawn-out government contracts, and so a typical process would be we would go out, we would film what we needed, and a lot of times what we're doing is we're actually filming in Denver if we need a studio. That's why we wanted to maybe build our own studio to bring those rental costs down for the company. But since the initial concept, like I said, that workload has changed. We're now doing a lot more traveling. We're doing smaller videos where we're actually traveling to specific Air Force bases around the country, and the need for a studio has significantly decreased.
So, I love your story, by the way. I think that is awesome. That is big, yay. Question, signage, well, you've been in our community long enough. Continuity and consistency throughout the community is very important to me. And with that being said, I love the idea that you're being the main holder of that area. In your since you're gonna be not only the developer, but the owner of this main area, who would you consider a good neighbor on those lots 2 to 7 if we change the zoning?
I would speak for Denise, because her first option would be like an Einstein Bagels. She's a big fan of that.
Okay.
And that's a little humor for that, but we're thinking, you know, smaller restaurants. That's one thing that we do love about Monument. Monument has an extremely diverse restaurant spectrum. There is a lot of options up here, and that's one of the best things that about Monument. So we'd like to see more of that. We would like to see maybe more office space. There are some, it seems like dental offices are extremely popular in Monument. We see those everywhere. Not that we need more of them, but they seem to be well accepted. We're not really picky, as long as it's not something that produces a ton of noise or has a ton of impact on what we do on a daily basis. And, you know, we're sensitive the same way you guys probably are to, you know, new developments coming in, and how does this impact the community, you know? And we even on that list, because I couldn't see that being a part of the community. But so I guess to answer that question, we're pretty open to that, as long as it fits within the area and it's accepted. I mean, there's a reason that you guys are up here. There's a reason that this goes through a process. So, and we fully respect that.
And then signage on the building itself, is that no?
It's not included at this time. It would still require a separate sign permit.
Okay. Sorry, it was.
Yeah, that's the other thing is because we're a film company, you can imagine that we have, you know, sensitive equipment, expensive things within that building. We don't like to broadcast that we're a film company. We don't like to put up, you know, a giant reel on the side of the building that says, hey, come steal our stuff. So, so signage, we would want to make sure that we're being consistent with, you know, what the town of Monument would like.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
I think the more, no, thank you for
Thank you,
talking
Matt.
about that
Pass it back
company and
to-
everything like that,
pass it
that's
back to
great.
Brett, so.
Would there be some openness to modifying some of the applicable uses and perhaps, I quite frankly, to be perfectly blunt, if the town sees, I think, one more,
AutoZone.
not necessarily auto,
Oh.
any car parts facility or car repair facility, I think it would be challenging.
You know, heard loud and clear. It's hard for us to dictate, you know, what future development demands. And, you know, development is user-driven. And when a user determines that demand is warranted, you know, by the community, then they develop. And so, you know, the automotive uses that are in this town, you know, I think they're staying in business and, you know, are doing well. I'd agree. I'm not sure that there's gonna be a whole lot more additional. Could I see a southbound gas service station? Possibly, you know. I think, you know, the Murphy is there and it's kind of difficult to get in and out of, and, you know, there could be a southbound service station. And so do we want to exclude that? I don't think so. You know, could there be an enterprise rental car? You know, possibly. You know, there could be these type of uses that I just don't think that we can exclude. But if there are, you know, certain things like, you know, noise or things that are affected, I'm open to it, so.
I do think in some respects, the repair facilities do have certain noise issues that accompany them. I can see kennels, although it eliminates the sole use, kennels being the focus of the business there, could be challenging.
Yes.
Those are the main ones that I'm really.
But
The
it
veterinary-
excludes kennels.
It
Yeah.
excludes kennels as a primary use.
Gotcha. I would be willing to strike right through it, so.
And I just think we have the opportunity right now just to kind of,
Yeah. So to highlight some of the things, the changes that we've done, so PID for your reference, I'll just name a couple of them.
Yeah.
Bottling and food processing, electrical substation, feed stores and lumber yards, fences, golf courses, industrial supply facilities, manufacturing. These are all things that are within PID. You guys know that doesn't fit.
right.
So we've taken it to more of a commercial, retail, office type development. And from PCD, kind of keeping it open, you know, we've removed golf courses, mortuaries, parking lots and structures, dormitories. That's about it. And we've added, as they said, brew pubs and distilleries, hotels, motels, film studios, you know, so.
Taking a slightly different perspective, is there anything else that perhaps is excluded, and this is directed toward you and also towards you, Jennifer, is there anything that we have excluded that there is a demand for that maybe we should consider including? Because we talked about brew pub and distilleries,
Yeah,
because those were not
definitely
currently on our
open to
list,
it.
so I think that is a
Those are
very
the big
welcome
ones. That's
addition.
what we hear all the time.
Yeah,
Is
That's
there anything else that
very
that you're hearing that we should be including?
no, I
Those are the
agree.
big ones because we don't have language that addresses them right now.
Okay.
To add additionally to your concerns, so there are going to be a couple of documents that are recorded against the property, reciprocal access and grant of easement agreement, as well as a common area maintenance agreement, which spells out who will maintain the roads and how they'll be maintained. The RAGE, in addition to granting easements and giving cross-access across property, so all lot owners can travel across each other's property, it also adds some additional restrictions on uses. I can name a couple of those, but no portion of any parcel shall be used for any of the following purposes: a flea market, cemetery, mortuary, any establishment engaged in the businesses of selling, exhibiting, or delivering pornographic or obscene materials, a so-called head shop, off-track betting parlor, junkyard, recycling facility, or stockyard, adult entertainment facility, or any facility that grows, stores, distributes, markets, sells, or dispenses marijuana, so forth. So,
Very good. Now, Brett, who are you with? What,
I'm with the company's called Creekside Developers,
okay.
yeah, and then as well as the Jackson Creek Land Company. Commissioner Wilhelmy, I can touch on the combining of lots 2 through 7 and add on to what Jennifer has stated. There are some natural barriers, as she's mentioned. We have a drainage facility cutting across, you know, on the north and the south, so those lots are kind of set where they're at. There's not going to be a building that goes across. So that would be lot 2 and lot 7. So on both of those, there's a drainage facility. Then you have the electrical overhead easement cutting through. That would be 3, 4. Where's the plat? Lot 5, I believe. So could there be a multi-tenant retail building? Yes, and that, you know, I could probably envision something like that. We've been in discussions with a couple of restaurants, one being local and one national, and as well as a salon that's interested, and you know, that could be a potential second phase. I also, in addition to Ferrari and myself, we have a civil engineer, our land planner, architect, and traffic engineer to answer any questions. And I know that y'all want talk to Jeff again, so I might have him come up, and then we can come back to me if you have additional questions.
While Jeff comes up, I will just inform the commission. Staff actually worked with the applicant quite a bit and encouraged them to create these multiple lots over on that east side. Originally, when submitted, it was one really big lot, which honestly didn't make a lot of sense because it couldn't develop that way. It's much more likely to develop this way or in some configuration similar, right? Maybe 2 of the lots in the middle are combined, but the others, like I said, sort of have to stay. So that was actually strongly encouraged by staff just because it's a little bit more, not only marketable on their end, but it just makes more sense. I felt it was more misleading to show you one ginormous lot that will absolutely come back to you to be divided into more lots, right? From sort of a general perspective, it makes more sense to do the most it could be at the beginning, and then if it is tailored down, that's a little bit easier process-wise, right? Than if it's 1, and then we come back and now it's 2, and then we come back and now it's 4, and then, so that was actually staff-driven, just to put a little perspective in there so that you know sort of where that came from. There were a lot of natural reasons for those to be developed like that.
Thank you. What are the maximum height requirements or limits?
The maximum height is 50 feet.
It's 50 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jeff.
Hello, Jeff Hodgson, LSC Transportation Consultant. The traffic signal at Harness, Jackson Creek, we've been meeting with TriView and their consultant to help with the planning of the widening and the improvements to Jackson Creek Parkway. And one of the analysis you may be aware that they're looking at is they're looking to plan for the signal locations along the parkway as far as setting up for good signal progression and those sorts of things. So they've done a series of analysis looking at different scenarios with signals and phasing and access points and that sort of thing. So we're working with them on that, and we incorporated their kind of preliminary initial analysis into our report, looking at the kind of looking at the big picture and then we focused more on this one intersection, but in the context of the big picture and with some of the parameters that were from that TriView report. So that just so you know, that's kind of something we're continuing to work on. We'll continue to work with TriView and their consultant on that. As far as signalization of that intersection, basically signal warrants, there's a series of 8 warrants for traffic signals, and most of them they're based on traffic volumes. Combination of the major street traffic is what we call which is Jackson Creek, and then the side street or minor street traffic, or which from the stop signs, which is Harness. And in this case, it would be both sides of the parkway when this access is added. So for phase 1, there's not, certainly the traffic from the phase 1, the Ferrari building would not produce enough traffic from that side of the road to warrant a signal. At some point when those other lots develop, and that's something we can look at when those other lots come in for development, we can look at their more, their uses better defined and their trip generation defined, and run some analysis on, okay, if they're doing lots 2 through 3, and 4, with the next submittal or whatever that comes in, do those uses generate enough traffic at that particular time or looking forward to warrant the signal? And the other thing that's in play is the other side of the road, because signals are either warranted on one side or the other. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at the traffic on either side separately. You can look at, so when they connect, when Harness connects over and to Cloverleaf and that or Bowstring, and then you have the potential for traffic coming up from the south and using as a shortcut. And we did estimate the shortcutting volumes in our traffic report, but obviously they're our best estimates So, you know, as moving forward, obviously those intersections volumes will be monitored, and if it happens to meet the warrants, then the signal technically shouldn't go in until the warrants are met based on traffic volumes, but it's really up to, the warrants are guidelines, so obviously the town or Triview can decide to install a signal at any time. But those, typically, government jurisdictions wait until the warrants are met because they're there for good reason. Because if you put in a signal that's not warranted yet, you can have other problems and things like that. So, so that the short answer though is that they'll be looked at each stage moving forward as things start to, as roads get connected, and as with this project, as other lots in the second phase come on and start generating traffic. And so that's when we can look, you know, at that time, this more specific numbers that we're talking about. So I hope that's answers your question. So they're very specific. You know, you've got, there's a combination of 8-hour warrants, there's 4-hour warrants, there's warrants that if you have a lot of accidents or crashes, that can also, you know, lower the amount of traffic volume that you can have to justify the signal. So becomes a combination of crash history and volumes that could justify. And they could use, there's warrants that look at system warrants, like does it help the whole system if they put a signal in at this location. So there's other warrants that speak to that too, so.
What about a warrant for a left-hand turning lane going northbound? on Jackson
Like
Creek.
like a phase, like a left turn phase?
Well, my concern is on Jackson Creek, we go from two lanes down to one, and then you're gonna move up about maybe 50 yards, and the 16 to 20 employees are taking a left-hand turn into Harness. Guess what happens when they can't turn because the south coming traffic
Yeah, I
on
see what you're
Jackson
saying.
Creek?
So a left turn lane
Yes.
warrant, yeah. So we,
What constitutes that? What would
there's-
be the need for that?
there are certain thresholds
Okay.
and they have, in the code, you have a certain turning volume that justifies that. And with the first building, that phase would not be met.
Okay.
So, but, the plans are being worked on to do the upgrade to Jackson Creek Parkway, the 4-laning, and that will incorporate a left turn lane automatically, because they're gonna
Excellent.
have,
Okay.
yeah. So that will have it's planned to have a center left turn lane built into it, so.
Perfect. Good. Thank you.
You have more information than we have not heard any of the details about the expansion.
So-
So you have more information than we do.
Oh, okay.
That's
And
awesome.
there's another question about the pedestrians.
Yeah, that was mine.
Yeah,
Folks from the senior center have unique characteristics that would not be addressed within standard municipal codes or within the standard warrant system. And I was wondering if accommodations for the uniqueness of the clientele using that particular intersection had been addressed.
now the typical standard for, and it has to do with pedestrian crossing time. You have your walk time where the white man stands there,
Yeah.
that's 7 seconds usually, and then you have your flash and don't walk, and that's based on the distance crossing the street, and it's 3.5 seconds per, 3.5 feet per second is the assumed, and it used to be 4, and they've dropped it down to 3.5 feet per second, so it accommodates a greater percentage of the population for, and that's pretty much a standard, around the country is that's a standard walk time. Now, that's not to say you couldn't do something a little bit out of the ordinary if the circumstances
I
dictate.
just didn't know if it had
So,
been addressed. So what I'm
Yeah,
hearing is that it
that's-
has not actually been addressed yet, but that is something that comment
So-
to be made at a later time.
So this intersection will have pedestrian push button, and they'll be able to cross the street. When they push the button, it'll give them more time to cross. And that's all being part of what Triview's consultant's looking at is you know, how do you keep traffic moving on Jackson Creek and still allow for those that time for pedestrians to cross if they push the button, and they're given that extra time to cross, so. That's a pretty standard,
It's a
crossing
target
time,
issue,
yeah, so. You know, I've seen other, you know, there are certain accommodations you can make for deaf and blind. Like I know in the Springs, there's a deaf and blind school, and they have like Audible. So they make accommodations based on the circumstances or the particular site, so,
That's good enough.
yeah.
Any further questions? No? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions at all for the applicant?
Yeah.
No? I'd like to open the public comment period at this time. If anybody has comment they would like to make on the proposed development? Ms. Taylor.
Terry Higgs, Tri-Lakes Chamber. I just want to talk to the fact that a town, any goal of ours is BRE, business retention and expansion. It is way easier to keep your businesses here and help them expand than it is to attract new businesses. So that's always one of our primary goals in economic development. In addition to, obviously, we want new businesses here. Ferrari Films is like the poster child of this, starting with 3 employees, going to the 16 that they are currently, and then potentially going up to 35. And these are not $15 an hour jobs. These are careers. These are jobs where people pay their bills, they have families. These are exactly the type of companies that we want here. The nice thing about this is once they expand and they actually have, you know, this great, nice, beautiful building, businesses like this attract other businesses. And so these are exactly the type of places we want. We are a huge commuter town. We would love to get more people here living and working, as I said before, get them stop commuting and have them have opportunities to have jobs here like locally. So they are actually the perfect type of business that Monument will benefit by supporting in their expansion. I also would like to just quickly speak to, I know you guys are really, and you should be always concerned how a building will act in its capacity around like what it's going to look like. I would highly recommend to not have it look exactly like the rest of Jackson Creek. Jackson Creek is commercial. There's a lot of commercial development there, and it is not going to look good if everything looks exactly the same. You need variety, you need something different. People driving down Jackson Creek need to know where to turn, because if all the buildings look the same, they're gonna have to be paying attention to where they're going. It's just a lot easier to have a little bit different, and the modern buildings, the colors are very similar to what's there now. So the fact that it's a modern building, I just hope it doesn't, you know, cause too many concerns. The last thing I wanted to bring up was, I know you mentioned the auto places. You can imagine we hear that a lot. So what I always explain to our residents out there is when any community is growing, it's the people, it's the rooftops that come first. The thing that comes second are the things we have to have. And right now, those 2 things we seem to have are auto places and dentists. There are an amazing amount of dentists. People don't realize it quite as much so because they don't take up as much room as these big auto places. But we're a commuter town. So the vast majority of our people are commuting out. We're putting way more miles on our cars than other people are. We also are putting on snow tires that a lot of other communities don't. So we actually have a greater use. So you're gonna see services come next, all those things we have to have. Once we get all of those, then we get to get the fun things like the brew pubs and the gin places, which hopefully will be in here pretty soon, nice restaurants. Those are the discretionary dollars. So we've got to get the services in first so that people are happy with everything that they have and they want to move here because they can run all their errands. Then we bring in the places that they can bring in their extra money. So that's just one of the things what I educate other people about this. It's like, you know what, just be patient. The fun stuff will come. We just have to have the not fun stuff first. So I just hope you approve this. I can see a lot of interesting businesses that will go into the area, and we're extremely excited for this project, not just for Ferrari, but what could bring in the other areas too. So we hope you approve it. Thank you.
May I actually ask you a question before you shut that down? So, one of the, and just, my background happens to be in film and entertainment. When you have kind of like one anchor business, some of the ancillary businesses tend to come in.
Mhm.
So my question when I was looking at do we need to add anything to the definition of what is permissible commercial use within the zone? Is there anything that we need to add? Let's say some other business decided to come in and do a studio, or some other business decided to come in and do more like film equipment rentals, stuff like that. Is that currently a permissible use within our definitions? I don't want to have an anchor business and yet not be able to facilitate the auxiliary businesses that it could attract because our definition is too restrictive for those other uses. So that's kind of where my thoughts are, is when I'm looking at those definitions, making sure we could still welcome in those ancillary businesses. And
I think that's a question that Jennifer's gonna have us, but I would imagine anything that's really kind of office oriented. There's not, you don't have anything, a strange product, something that's not a normal product. I don't think there'd be a difference from film equipment to tennis shoes, I guess would be the question.
You know, some kind of esoteric stuff. But I didn't.
So, along with what Terry's saying, I think there are some pretty general categories that I have to assume with my limited knowledge of the industry that they would fit into. Such as we have warehousing and office, we have basic retail, we have services, we even have some, minimal light industrial. If there was a real concern about that, like I said, if you know of something, we could add it to film studio and related uses or something like that. Obviously, the use list is always the hardest part, right? Because you want to,
It is.
excuse me, you want to include everything that you might want while reducing, what you potentially don't want while still making it viable for the developer. But I think there are some pretty good categories in there that could hold a lot of potential uses, like I said, just based on what I know. The idea of these is to be general in nature, right? That's kind of what the zoning does. I have to assume warehousing and office would accommodate most,
I would agree.
with the addition of retail there, right? If it was renting or something like that, you could do that through retail, I would assume.
Is there a definition of film studio that exists? Because it's been added in, I'm assuming a definition of companies that does it?
It is not at this time.
Okay. That's concerning.
Well, but there was the exception,
I love definitions.
there was the exception that he read in regards to what that can and will or will not allow.
No, and I, I have no problem with the things that it cancels out. My thought is that if we have uses coming in without definitions, is that we are at risk of repeating, and I don't mean to hold you there.
No,
We are at risk of repeating the clinic issue. And that is something that I am just adverse to, like from a policy perspective. So for the things that are added in, like for film studio, I would make it film and or sound studio. And then I would have a definition that accompanied that as to what was a permissible use.
I mean, that's something, we could certainly codify that language and just add it to our general section of the code if that's something that is helpful.
Just my thought, anything that, whenever you have words put together that do not have definitions behind them, anybody is free to interpret them however they wish.
Well, as you know, there's many existing, so. Actually, in my mind, something like film studio is a little more concrete than some of the big broad terms we have, right? But we could certainly add that if that's, what the commission would, and or the board would like to see. Easy enough.
I don't think this is and this is the thing where I don't think we're the ones that should be really defining that.
No. Staff could bring a definition before the board for approval.
Our thought is just that any term being added that is unique to this plat should come with a definition. Or any use that is unique should come with a definition.
Sure.
Because, clinic got us into a mess. I don't have, and no other public comment? I'm gonna go ahead and close the public comment period. Okay. Discussion, any concerns, issues?
I mean, I just, taking this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different aspects to this, right?
Okay, so let's start
So we got
with,
the zone change.
and I have no
I'm
opposition
fine
to,
with the
I'm
zone change.
fine with the zone change, happy about the zone change.
Right.
Yeah.
All good. And then the preliminary PD site plan, that regards what specifically?
It's the list of allowable uses and some of those really basic parameters and notes, right? The height, some setbacks, lot coverage, pretty basic, right? Four-sided architecture, some things that default to other places, but some landscaping standards. So sort of, again, one step in between a very, very general sketch plan and your final. So primarily, it's defining the allowable uses.
Okay, so just clarify for me, if we're, for whatever reason, all agreeable into, look, another auto shop is not desired. It doesn't fit the town, at least at this time, if we see it, we could strike that from the permissible use.
You could. I would encourage you to have that conversation with the applicant because they may pull their project if they don't feel, right? They may not want to move forward. That's all I will say. They may not want to move forward if, right, you struck 5 uses.
Any thoughts?
Well, I would be loath to see another one here. I would actually defer to Terry's comment with regards to,
I totally disagree with that. I mean, with all due respect, Terry, I mean, we have like Northgate, Northgate has boku of everything and anything around it. I mean, it's, what they don't have are auto body shops.
that's true.
What they've been able to get in and do with that area is pretty amazing. Everything from a go-kart track to Bourbon Brothers to you name it.
To a concert hall.
To a concert hall. I mean, with the exception of, I think they have 1 gas station, right? Like, it's pretty amazing what they did, and it's not, they've been able to develop without the need for 1, 2, 3, I think we have 7 auto body on and around Baptist.
Okay.
It's striking. So, I don't know if, even though the market could handle another one, but that's not really my analysis. It's really the idea that we have, it just doesn't seem to fit anymore. I mean, I grew up in a town that was right next to the town that was known for, that's where you went to get your car repaired. You just ended up there. And, I mean, it was like, that town turned into something that no one wanted to go to. Because that town turned into Auto Row. And it wasn't just car dealerships, it was auto repair facilities. And it was, they just started popping up, and they didn't stop it. And it really, it concerns me, being a resident, to say, you know what, this isn't, I understand that there might be a restricted use, and that restricted use might be no more auto body shops, at least on this, what we're deciding right here. Okay, there's a whole list of other businesses that can go in there. It's not like, it's not killing that. It's like, I don't know, I just,
What if we
I'm
left,
sensitive to that.
if we allowed the service station item to remain but struck the others?
Like a gas station?
That's an option. I don't see it happening, but leaving the option.
I would be happy with getting any sort of limited use. I mean, to me, it makes sense. There's a lot of business that can be done there, and I can't see an auto body shop being that attractive to, the anchor that is Ferrari Films, which I applaud. I mean, I want to see you guys flourish. I want to see that area flourish, no doubt about it. And to me, it's like, we have another opportunity to develop a cool marketplace, like a marketplace that's desirable, that's not another big box store, that's not another, we got those. And I don't want to see it turn into just a strip mall or a parsed out strip mall. because it's cheap and it generates revenue. So, I don't know, I'm talking a lot.
I would I just, if we can eliminate number 7 and 8 on the zone change, that's my 2 cents.
I'm kind of a free market sort of guy. Whatever the people want and will pay for is what ought to go there.
I mean, you mentioned limiting to, no gentlemen's clubs, right?
Right.
So there is a limit, there are bounds. I think it's reasonable to have bounds. So, I respect that as well, but at some point it's, okay, and where do we stop?
May I ask a point of order question, Jennifer?
Of course.
Can we ask the applicant their feelings on 7 and 8?
I think we're at the point of closing public hearing or
There
public
is.
comment,
That was my point of
at
order.
which
so
time
go
the
ahead.
applicant has the opportunity to rebut.
Okay. Can I see the applicant again, please?
So we will continue to own, at this time, lots 2 through 7, as well as the land to the north. And, a lot of the residential area to the east. We want what's best for this community as well. So, we're all about, making it look nice, putting the right businesses in here. So, that's what we're trying to do. I don't believe, even though they are auto repair facilities, I think the Les Schwab is a pretty darn good looking building as well as the other ones. Limiting the automotive repair, maybe, but I don't know. If that is what determines recommendation or approval, you guys recommend it however you see fit.
Okay, thank you so much.
I would remind the commission that the cost of the land is in some ways going to determine the users that go there, right? There's obviously other land in the town zoned certain ways that is at a different price point. Right, that goes back to Commissioner Dick's market-driven decision on who goes where. I'm excited to hear your motion.
How about the final PD site plan? So we had talked about the preliminary, some of the issues there. In that final PD site plan, what are we precisely deciding?
The final PD site plan would be the last time you would see the Ferrari Film Project. It includes the very exciting detention pond, right, and it just ensures that those roadways would be built to get to the Ferrari project. So really, it's your last chance to see the Ferrari project. It's approval for that site.
Including lots 2 through 7, or?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have it on your screen. I have it on my screen. So only what's in the green area, the detention pond, the roadway, and the Ferrari site, lot 1.
I have no issue.
I have no issues with that.
And then the final plat, that's where we're going with
The lots.
lots.
It only draws the lot lines. That's all it does, basically, so that those could be sold as individual lots if the developer had a user to come in and wanted to buy a lot.
What are the offset requirements from Jackson Creek? Just curious for
The-
those lots.
The setback,
Yeah, setback, sorry.
25 feet front and rear, 10 feet on sides.
And it's consistent with what's happening just to the south of it. Yeah?
Pretty close, mm-hmm. And again, we don't really know how those lots will develop at this time, right? Which side will be the front?
Right.
We don't know at this time. Again, their access will only be from the private drive. I think a lot of that's determined by what type of use goes in.
So for me, this all comes down to, again, permissible uses.
That's the big one.
Proper definitions, because in some aspects, they don't exist.
Right.
And nixing 7 and 8.
I'm with you. Yeah.
What was 21? I wrote 21, but I didn't write, I just wrote the number.
Public or private membership clubs and health clubs.
Okay.
Would you mind putting the screen back on that had the page with the list back on it again? And then, Jennifer, when, in the past, because I don't know how this has been done, when somebody comes forward with an additional use, and I'm going to use the term film studio as an example, has there been a defined point in the process where that gets defined? Or has that procedural issue never really been resolved in the course of our development process?
Historically, no, I don't think it's been defined unless it was a, very unusual term that needed to be defined. I think it's something we're looking at as a part of the overall, right, improvements to the code of some more consistent definitions. But, where do those apply? That becomes the issue.
Where do those need to come in the process? I think we're kind of, for example, I think with this, we have a couple of things that have been added in without definitions, and that's what's causing us to pause, and that there needs to be, I think, a point earlier in the process where proposed definitions accompany a proposed use.
If I might, there is a process. The process is that the staff makes a determination as to whether it fits into a category or not. If there's a disagreement, then it goes to the Board of Trustees for further interpretation.
So what is the proposed definition for film studio?
I don't think that's the question myself. I think the question is, does X use fit into that classification? In other words, somebody comes
If we
in,
don't have the classification defined, we cannot determine if it fits in.
that's what we do through the process of staff interpretation that can be appealed to the, which is what happened with the clinic, that this time would go to the Board of Trustees, not the Board of Adjustment. I just don't think you're ever going to get to the point where you have a definition that isolates a particular business.
I'm not looking for a particular business. I am looking for a definition which encompasses permissible uses that are applicable to a given term. So film studios encompasses what type of permissible uses?
Film studio.
And I can tell you, I can name you a 25-page definition of what that means.
Give me one.
A recording studio for, let's say, any type of direct-to-video product.
Sure.
And see, all these guys are smiling because they know exactly where I'm headed. What if that product is XXX?
I'm not sure what regulations we have, as long as it's not being shown. If it's being produced here, I don't think we have any regulations against it.
And I don't know. And is that the type of production that we wish to encourage?
I guess what I'm indicating with my little bit more than,
It's all film
a little
studio.
bit more than 12 years of experience,
It's actually 15, I was rounding down.
you're not gonna solve this problem. You're gonna have to let the adjudication of this problem or potential problem settle out through the process I talked about.
So I think that is we honestly, we won't do it tonight, but that is a process that
It's
needs to be
getting late.
revisited.
Gotta get to bed.
So, and for my clarification, there's, to me, 4 distinct issues that we're voting on, not just one encompassing all.
It's presented to you as a package. I suppose you could vote on each one individually if you wanted to, but if the preliminary PD site plan is not approved, we couldn't move forward to the final, because you have to have a preliminary first. So that's why they were sort of presented in that sequence. For example, if you didn't want to approve the zone change,
Right.
we're done. We wouldn't move on to vote on the others. Other than the plat, you could vote on the plat, I suppose.
You wanna do get a few things out of the way?
We have to have a lot of faith in the applicant and who they want as neighbors.
But they don't get to decide that.
You know,
No, once it's within a permissible use and somebody comes forward, it is,
correct, this is the time.
this is the only time we have. No, that we make a recommendation, obviously, the Board of Trustees is the one that issues the final approval.
Right.
So, we can ask them that we feel that the additional terms, need definition. And that we recommend striking 7 and 8.
I agree.
Sounds like a preface to a motion.
It's coming. Well, I just wanna, I didn't take exact notes. What are the additional terms that have been added in that are brand new to our PCDs?
Film studio, I apologize. Brew pubs and distilleries, and actually I did speak with the applicant quite a bit about the brew pubs and distilleries, and I'm currently writing language for the downtown that will define those, and so that is being handled.
Okay.
And the reason I say all that is because there's a little bit of concern about putting a definition in this particular PD site plan where it only applies to this PD site plan, right? If we put it in the overall code, it applies to everything. It's obviously much more consistent. So when they brought that up, I completely agreed, yes, let's allow those, right? That is the hottest thing out there.
Yep.
Castle Rock's got 5 million breweries.
We're all like that.
Maybe not that many. And so that was already being handled and being addressed, so.
Okay. And what's the other addition?
Film studio.
Those are the only 2?
I believe hotel was added as well. Brett, were there others? You can remind me, I believe hotel, motel?
Change, it was public accommodation.
Oh, that's right. I told him I didn't like that language.
And we have a definition
Yes.
for hotel motel. So
Mhm.
really the only thing that needs to be defined would be film studio. And I would suggest changing that to film or recording studio. So we could add sound recording studios in.
And once again, if somebody came to me under that definition, it's very likely I would approve a sound production facility under film
Film or
production.
sound.
And I think that's awesome while you're here and in the aspect that we all are kind of somewhat transient.
And
we're
if
all-
it was done differently, the applicant could appeal that decision to the board, and it would be adjudicated. And that happens a lot.
Yeah, and
I mean, it happens for me to interpret it. Rarely does it end up at the board.
What about splitting up 7 and 8? Because like Brett said about enterprise, rent a car. You know, I think that may be a need for our community. So what about splitting up 7 and 8? Still allowing it, but defining it.
But it has a universal definition, and we do not want to have a unique definition to this plot of land. Being inconsistent is, well,
It's
not
not
good.
part of our comprehensive plan. That's true. Okay.
There's always the option that you leave 8, you leave retail sale of gasoline, and you could put auto repair as a conditional use. If it was a fantastic proposal, I don't know if the applicant's okay with that. I'm just throwing it out as another option that could be considered. If it was a fantastic proposal that you all loved, it would come back before you, right? Maybe it's some new thing we haven't heard of or thought of. It would come back before you without being expressly prohibited. They could do it at the same time as a final PD site plan if they, again, if it was something that was actually desirable, but maybe fit into that category.
It's just,
what is the term, conditional use is what you called it?
Mm-hmm.
I like that, it's kind of like, well, that it comes back before us.
well, unfortunately, what happens is it comes to us and, oh, the rules allow it, so you can't say no.
That's not true with a conditional use. So, right, a conditional use, they're elsewhere in the code. It's basically that by its nature, right, or its potential impact, that it needs a little bit additional review. So it's not a use by right, it's a use by conditional review. Typically, right, there's a certain number of conditions that could be imposed in order to mitigate any type of negative impact, right? It has triple the landscaping, or, right, a screening wall, or whatever the issue is, right? Improved architecture or something like that. Again, I'm not trying to influence you, I'm just giving you another option in between allowing it or deleting it.
I think that, yes, I think that, thank you for the suggestion, I think that's a good compromise. Yeah.
Use a lot.
Okay.
7 or 8 with conditional.
So I would ask the commission, do you want to allow, though, retail sale of gasoline as a use by right? And is it only auto repair that's conditional use?
I would ask for conditional, but that's.
I would be fine with conditional, taking a look at. I would say 7 and 8 as conditional uses.
I agree.
Including sales and rental?
Yeah. That's what's part of 7 and 8, or 8.
Yeah, to be consistent, so
I
we
wouldn't
say,
break that apart.
yeah, we're not gonna break apart 7 and 8, we're just gonna say 7 and 8 conditional.
There we go. I think I like that compromise.
And ask that film studio to change to film and recording studio, and
Film and
we'll go forward. And just ask that it be defined. How do we need to put word these?
May I repeat back?
Yes,
So
please.
what I heard is that someone's gonna craft a motion to recommend approval with conditions, and those conditions would be, number 1, revise, permitted use, I don't really wanna refer to it as 7 and 8,
Zone change.
but
Refer to-
revise automotive uses, automotive repair, service facilities, sales and rental facilities as conditional use. To be allowed per conditional use only. To amend film studio to film and recording studio.
Please.
Is number 3 require a definition to be provided for that?
I think we should, yes.
Okay.
And then we will, and then, we don't need to add this as a condition, but that brew pubs and distilleries will be defined within, you're working on that.
I'm working on that right now.
This town codes, we're not gonna add anything about that. Knowing that that definition will carry it over onto this property, correct?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your patience on working with us on this. I approve,
You,
I motion to approve the zone change, the preliminary PD site plan, the final PD site plan, and the final plat of Monument Marketplace North with the said conditions that are noted by Jennifer Jones.
Forever in the record. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Dick?
No.
Chairman Glover?
yes.
Commissioner Wilhelmie?
Yes.
Commissioner Strop?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Seeing is that we have none. I will go ahead and close public comment. Reports and communications, anybody from the commission have anything to report?
No.
Ma'am?
No, ma'am.
I do not, do you, sir?
No.
No? Jennifer, do you or Larry have anything to read?
I have multiples.
Aha.
Sorry, I'm trying to get to that slide. I have a couple of things for the commission. I know it's like, I'll be very quick. Number one, we had intended to have several workshops. Those did not happen for various reasons. If anyone has any comments on any of those materials, or if you would like to see a workshop at a future hearing when we have fewer public hearing items, we can certainly do that.
What does our next month look like?
Likely 2, possibly 3, but a little more on the simple end,
Let's not do it then.
presumably.
Do you have a forecast on August right now?
I don't yet,
Okay,
so, but that, I don't yet.
let's not do it let's not workshop in July.
That's fine, yeah.
Is that okay?
So-
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone wants to look over those materials, right, there were a couple of handouts, there was a handout for the public, there was some basic language that we did not use tonight, the sort of standard language for anyone, not anyone, for the chairman or the vice chairman in the chairman's absence to sort of try to keep the meetings consistent, right, some consistent language, so nothing super duper urgent, I just wanted to bring it up since I haven't seen you all in so long.
If you guys have any changes that you think would be appropriate, please feel free to chime in.
Okay,
Okay, that's,
thank you.
So,
y'all have run enough meetings.
my second item is my promised very exciting item, that the department found out today that we were awarded the DOLA grant for the zoning code rewrite, so congratulations.
So
are rolling
excited.
out. So we have an RFP
That is
out
huge news.
right now. I told you.
Nice.
That's
I
so
delivered on
huge.
my
Oh my
promise.
God.
Would you repeat what you just said,
Wow,
please,
that's great.
slowly?
So we were awarded a $100,000 grant from DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, to help fund the rewrite of our zoning and subdivision ordinances.
That is
Great.
fantastic.
That's awesome.
So will you, as soon as that RFP comes in, will you be looking for committee member volunteers and all that kind of stuff?
I assume so. I don't have that all outlined out yet. A lot of that will come from the consultant that's hired, right? Sort of how, their process and things like that. I have to assume so.
Yeah. When is the deadline for those submissions?
Middle of July.
Okay, so we have a little ways yet.
We have a little ways, so that just went out to be sure to give them. It's a very, very busy time. So we
Yeah.
don't want to, have too short of a window
Oh,
and not get
absolutely.
the appropriate proposals.
I actually
So,
think that's a very quick turnaround. But
yeah,
that's
so,
such good news.
that's what we have right now. So we're really excited, right? A lot of that came from this group, right? I think you all really helped make that a priority for the board. So that's really exciting. So that should be starting, late summer.
Oh my,
Wow.
So
that's
That's
been years
exciting.
in the
Just
making right
curious,
there.
how long was that process to apply and then?
4 months or
4
so.
months? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it took about
A
a little
while.
over a year to get it in the budget, and because it was
Yeah, because we had to have a
recommended-
match.
It was
Got it.
recommended with the comprehensive plan, which
Mhm.
was, as I looked at it today, by the way, 3 years ago.
Yes, we've spoken with the town manager as well about, once we get the zoning code sort of done,
Yeah.
that's a quicker, easy process, then we'll be looking forward to budget money to update the comprehensive plan again.
Yeah,
So,
Nice.
those
Absolutely.
things work a lot better if you update them every 7 years or so, rather than
Absolutely.
every 30.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
yeah,
that's
so
our
that's,
major good news today, right there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Was it worth the wait? I don't know. It's awfully late, but, so that's really good. It's like I said, we just found that out today. So really, really exciting. So yeah, we'll be really busy. There are a lot of items in the queue. I think as you could see tonight, sometimes it takes things a long time to get all the way to you. So will they be here? I think there'll be a couple next month. There's others that, they may be here August, it may be November. I don't know, but, there's a lot happening. Sometimes happening slowly, but a lot happening, so. There's a lot of
Anything
players.
getting closer on Home Ranch Place?
Home Place Ranch, yes. I spoke with them about that tonight. To be very, very honest with you, the big slowdown with that is working with the county right now. Very similar to some of the projects tonight, right, the adjacent roadways our county roadways. And so that's simply a slow process, right? We're a little teeny tiny town and they're
Massive.
a big county, and
Largest county in the state.
you know, to get the full response that we need sometimes takes a while, and we've gone back and forth with the applicant, and, you know, they've revised things, and so it's just very slow. But we're hopeful that that's very close as well. I would love to bring that to you in August. You know, I don't know. That's no guarantee at any means, but hopefully soon. Yes, it's definitely still in the works. We get a lot of calls about it, a lot of questions.
With Jackson Creek Parkway, what is the kind of general timeline on, that seems to have kind of hit a stall point?
The widening,
Yeah.
I think they're beginning soon, aren't
Are
they?
they?
Yeah,
Looks like
they're already
Higby,
beginning.
Like they're ready to just throw some asphalt down.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're beginning. They've
Right,
done,
Well, it's not quite that easy, but I would suspect that they want to get it done by November.
Right.
Before snow
Our
starts.
curb and
anyway.
gutter, part of the,
Curb, gutter, sidewalk,
awesome.
Yeah, that would be
That's
nice.
up to Higby Road.
Up to Higby, and then it goes back.
with a
to-
median.
Because that's where Triview ends and the county begins.
Town.
Okay.
Town.
Oh, the town.
That's a
Town.
town road.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yes.
Those conversations are happening.
Okay,
Again, easier to discuss than to
understood.
physically make happen. But yeah, those conversations are happening. Like I said, there's a lot of things in the works.
Has, just so you guys know, I had asked Jennifer to work with Madeline in
Mhm.
Public Relations about developing perhaps a series of web posts on some of the basic terminology and some of the basic concepts that come into play for our board. So the people that come in front of us know a little bit more about what we can and cannot address. So has, like, the issue of a will serve letter. So if
Yeah.
a water authority issues that, there's nothing that we can say here as the board. We
Yeah.
can't
Right.
address water issues.
Right.
Has Madeline done any drafts or?
So it
looked
hasn't
at
gotten
any
to
of
that
those?
level yet. What we've
Okay.
started with are a little bit more superficial things. Fence permits, decks. This is the time for decks. So
yeah.
we really started more with a little bit easier level stuff about was a permit required for this? You know, yes, and some links and some things like that. So it's starting. I don't think to the level where you're looking for it to be, but that's something that'll kind of build up.
Okay,
Like I said, right now, for these early summer months, we're really sort of focusing on, you know, what we get a lot of calls about, which is said, our fence permits and decks and things like that right now. So yes, that's in the works. That's been happening monthly as a part of the newsletter and as a part of some of the posts and things like that. I also talked to her about, you know, showing the posting sign and things like that. So those are all coming. We've only been doing one a month right now.
still good.
Again, due to a variety of things, but we might be able to up that, especially maybe during the winter.
Now, one a month, because then you could just cycle around the next year, you just cycle back.
You
with the
see it,
same
right,
ones.
exactly. So that is definitely going on right now, like I said, in a pretty
I
simple
saw the
way.
deck one.
Yes. So, and honestly, it doesn't seem, that's a question we get a ton though. Do I need a permit? Yes. So sometimes we keep it really simple because you know how these things can get. You can get very lengthy very quickly. And so we've started with some of those really easy ones. I thought I had another update for you guys. I do have a couple. We've recently passed a number of really simple amendments to the code language. It's not something that hasn't happened in the past. I wanted to report to this group that was driven by the board and the town manager, really wanting to see those types of little updates. Nothing that strongly affects this group, fixing some things, right? Something was listed over here, but it wasn't listed over here. So fixing some simple things like that. Probably the most significant one was we actually added the term conditional use wasn't explained on how you handle that. Use by special review was. So we simply added a sentence that says, you know, any reference to conditional use will be handled per, you know, this section that outlines use by special review, because they're essentially the same sort of two terms. So in terms of how the public notice is done and the process and things like that. The other one is we made a change to how residential variances are handled. So, right, a residential variance, you know, if you need to encroach into your setback for a deck or the height of a fence, I mean, they're typically very, very simple, minor, right? The things that you can do, there's a short list. So for residential variances only, we changed the certified mailing requirement because it was 500 feet, and in a developed neighborhood, that was turning out to be like 70 people. Well, 70 of your neighbors aren't affected if your deck is 5 feet closer, right?
Right.
and it was really a cost burden on some of our homeowners, right? And we want to encourage that type of investment, you know, in your property and things like that. So we amended that to the notification requirements to immediate neighbors only.
Okay.
Again, the people that are going to be impacted. And so that was a positive change, I think. So those types of things, so we may be doing some more of those in the future. You know, it's a little bit tricky to be sure you don't get into something that then snowballs and you need to change like 12 other places.
Well, with the project coming up.
Exactly.
That's gonna handle hopefully a lot.
Those big ones, but we can fix a few of these little ones in the meantime, because I think, like you all, the board was tired of hearing, well, why isn't this just fixed? So we did some of those really basic ones.
Awesome.
So, like I said, we might do a few more. I am working on some downtown stuff right now, with the chamber and some other folks for some of these uses that, you know, are highly desirable, and when they come in, we have to be like, well, it's not really in there, you know, so things like that. So, like I said, there's a lot going on, so.
Thank you guys for responding and RSVPing, so we know farther in advance if we have a quorum or not. It helps. And then, do you guys want your tablets back at all? Like town issued, the town is willing to issue us tablets if you want them or if you have any use for them.
I'm okay.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I don't need.
The one thing that,
I just asked that I could use the internet. That's all I would like.
Yeah, I will have to find what that new password is. We'll make note of that.
and I'm fine, just having another screen up here so we can see and scroll and zoom in on certain things would be great, but again, if I can bring my own, but just as long as we have Wi-Fi use.
Or maybe we put one up there, if only, you know, if only one or two of you are interested.
Yep.
Something like that,
And
so.
that would be easier for,
Or we could share two, put them in between.
Yeah,
yeah, put them in between us and we're fine.
so we can work on that, I think. But you wanted me to just keep them and then just put them out for you, rather than you logging in and doing all that. So you're
Yeah.
checking your
We
emails
have-
and
I
things
have
like
enough-
that.
I have enough screens.
Right. Sure. So, yes, and I do thank you all for RSVPing. That's not for me to keep track on where you are, what you're doing. It's really for like tonight, if one of you weren't here, all of those applicants would have had to go home. Right, a lot of times come down for Denver or from the Springs or whatever. You know, they're paid pretty highly by the hour, and that's expensive and unnecessary for our applicants to not be able to have our hearing.
Yeah.
That's our obligation to them, is to be able to have the hearing. So that's why I urge you to please let me know, just so that I can make sure that we have a quorum. And if we don't, we can let them know, you know, a couple days ahead of time.
Right.
You know, and maybe we schedule a special meeting or we move it to the next or something like that. So that's really what that's about. It's not about, you know, anything else.
We're good.
So that's all I have. I apologize for the length.
I motion that we adjourn. Yeah. So did you guys ever get, and I know that Commissioner Dick has this, there was a poll that was done during the last comprehensive plan process.
So I wasn't here.
So I would like to forward it to you.
Yeah, because I've seen the results, which is, it was incorporated in.
And so, and I don't think it's,
I've printed that.
it's not, this is not in there.
They reference.
It's referenced, but it wasn't attached. I didn't know if you guys actually seen it. I will forward the slideshow to you.
That doesn't sound fun.
Thank you. See you. Good night.